Yeah. Right.
Stay as tall.
Jesse. Yeah.
So no indication.
No. Well, maybe if I
Send it out to everyone. All get together. I don't think we're going to be adjourned to the meeting.
yeah, and since Joseph was the main one, taking care of that, he's back on vacation.
Okay.
And he's a training kid with us. That's not an issue. He can sit here in policy. Every next 2 months, there's other things that need to be done. So.
Yeah, I'm looking to see.
Okay.
Okay. This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is called to order. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Bennett.
Present.
Commissioner Holman. Here. Commissioner Reddington. Commissioner Stern. Commissioner Friedman.
Here. Thank you very much. We will now have a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you very much. Rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Can those sitting in the back hear us with the microphone? Okay, great. Thank you. First order of business are consent items. Is there a motion from the commission?
I make a motion, we pass the consent items.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So a motion by Friedman, second by Hoagland. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Bennett.
Yes.
Commissioner Holman.
Yes.
Commissioner Stern.
Four.
Commissioner Friedman.
4. Motion passes. Tonight, there are no proclamations. There are no scheduled public comment. There is one public hearing, and that is resolution number 4603, a resolution of the City Commissioners of the City of Livingston, Montana, approving and authorizing the issuance of a refunding revenue anticipation notes in one or more series in an aggregated principal amount not to exceed $26 million pursuant to Montana Code annotated Title 90, Chapter 5, Part 1, approving the form and authorizing the execution of the refunding revenue anticipation notes and related documents and providing for the security, rights, and remedies with respect to the refunding revenue anticipation notes. Mouthful, isn't it? Mr. Meese.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So as the City Commission is aware, Resolution 4603 is similar to a resolution that was passed last year. This is to enable the continued financing on the Livingston Healthcare project. This indebtedness is at the responsibility of Livingston Healthcare to repay. It does not obligate the City of Livingston in any way, neither do we pledge any security against this loan. It is simply what is called a conduit bond, where we are the conduit for making this happen, and Livingston Healthcare is able to take advantage of the tax-free municipal status on those particular bonds to lower their borrowing costs. Certainly something that the administration supported last time we did this, and we remain in support of it. We remain in support of it for the purposes of this project. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know Mr. Lowe is here. If there's any other questions, I'm sure he'll be glad to answer.
Thank you very much. So this is a public hearing, and this public hearing is now open. Is there anyone who would like to comment on Resolution 4603, which is the reissuance of bonds for Livingston Healthcare? Notes, excuse me. Public hearing is open. Is there anyone who would like to comment on Resolution number 4603? Hearing none, this public hearing is now closed. Is there a motion from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we pass resolution 4603.
I'll second.
So motion by Friedman, second by Hoagland. Is there any discussion or questions for clarification?
Mr. Chair, if I could, I think, I know that Mr. Kogan has something to share with the City Commission that came like this afternoon. So,
Regarding this
on
issue?
yes.
Okay, great.
So the document that's in your packet has been amended. We received it late this afternoon. And we do have copies of the change. There's just one change in section 1.2 of the resolution where our bond counsel removed a reference to a national banking association.
Which section is it in again?
Under recitals, section 1.2.
1.2, okay. Is it possible to get that up on the screen so everyone can see that? Oh, you don't have quorum, all right. Okay, excuse me.
So if you go to the end of section 1.2, there's a reference that says between the city and Regions Bank, a national banking association. Our bond counsel removed a national banking association. They just took that language out. Everything else in the document remains the same.
So we do need to make a motion with that.
To amend, yes, the resolution to the new language.
Commissioner Freeman, would you like to amend your motion to accept the new language in section 1.2?
Yes.
Do you second that?
Second.
Further discussion? Anything else we need to know? Roll call, please.
Chairperson Bennett,
Yes?
Commissioner Holman,
Yes.
Commissioner Stern,
Or
Commissioner Freeman.
Four. Motion passes. There are no new ordinances tonight. We have several resolutions. First resolution is Resolution 4593 on behalf of the Urban Renewal Agency, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, approving the Livingston Urban Renewal Agency's facade and energy efficiency improvement programs for buildings within the Urban Renewal District and authorizing the Urban Renewal Agency to implement said programs. Mr. Meese.
Mr. Chair, as the City Commission is aware, this is a program that's been under discussion by the Urban Renewal Agency as well as the City Commission for several months. In a very summarized format, basically makes funding available for the coming fiscal year, $150,000 for facade grants, $150,000 for energy efficiency grants. It sets out a procedure by which folks can apply for those grants within the Urban Renewal Agency. The City Commission was previously provided financial information from the City Finance Department, which demonstrated more than enough capacity on behalf of the URA to support these grants for the coming year. I think it's a very worthwhile project and certainly reflects the good work of the Urban Renewal Agency and administration would be in support of moving this project forward. I don't know if Mr. Code has anything to add to it. He's the author of this particular document.
I just want to let the commission know that I did make the changes that were requested last time. Under preliminary eligibility requirements, there is no longer any reference to taxable building or buildings. And then if you go to the end of the document, paragraph 3 on the last page, City Commission review and approval no longer references the project's being a consent item. It just now requires approval of the City Commission.
That's good.
That's all.
Is there any public comment on this resolution? Public comment on resolution 4593, Urban Renewal Agency Facade and Energy Efficiency Program. Is there a motion from the commission?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 4593.
Second.
Motion by Hoagland, second by Friedman. Commission discussion, or questions or clarification? No? None?
Only that this is a great program. Good job, guys.
Yeah, very well done. Thank you, Urban Renewal. Thank you, Brian, and the administration for putting this together. It looks really well thought out. Very nice job. Okay, if there is no other public comment or comment from the commissioner, may we have roll call, please?
Chairperson Bennett,
Yes?
Commissioner Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Stern,
For.
Commissioner Friedman,
Four. Motion passes. Our next resolution is resolution number 4599, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the city manager to sign a professional service agreement with Thomas, Dean, and Hoskins Incorporated. Mr. Meese.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask Shannon Holmes, our Public Works Director, to come to the front of the room. So, Mr. Chair, as the City Commission is aware, the City of Livingston regularly employs a city engineer. It is typically a contracting engineering firm that we use to assist us with plan reviews, infrastructure projects, and other types of miscellaneous tasks that come up in the course of the year, predominantly related to public works. We have had our consultants in a few times on high water issues and other types of emergencies, but typically with our public works projects. Because this is a contract and because it's a contract of pretty sizable value over a period of time, it's always a responsible thing for us to do as a city on a regular basis to rebid those services. In city lingo, we call it an RFQ, request for qualifications. The difference there is that typically the decisions made in an RFQ process are based on qualifications much more so than particularly on just cost. And so your process needs to reflect that. And so at this point, Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Holmes and have him give you a bit more of a description of how this particular process went. So, Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Meese. Good evening. I come to you on behalf of the administration requesting approval of this 3-year term for TD&H. I'd like to say that I'm very happy with the process that we had. We received 10 SOQs from firms as far off as Billings to Bozeman, Belgrade, Montana. So myself, Matt Whitman, project engineer in the Public Works Department, and Mr. Woodhall, city planner, actually reviewed those. And we came up with a system where 4 of those firms separated themselves from the rest of the group. We had an interview process with those four, and Mr. Reese, our city manager, and the city attorney, Mr. Coate, participated in that. And we spent about an hour, hour and a half with each firm. And so I'm very comfortable with the process. And as a result, TD&H separated themselves from the rest of the group. They certainly are very qualified. And I look forward to, if approval tonight, introducing you to Mr. Keith Waring, who will basically be the city engineer for the next 3 years. So, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions, but there again, I'm very pleased and excited to start work, even on the next year's CIP project with them, hopefully at the next commission meeting. So,
Thank you very much.
Shannon,
yes,
SOQ.
statement of qualifications.
Thank you. Okay. We need a little chart on the wall back here with all these little acronyms and abbreviations. That'd be helpful. Okay, so why don't we start off with a motion, and then if anyone has any questions or clarifications for the administration, we can look at it that way. Please.
Mr. Chair, I make the motion we pass resolution 4599.
So motion by Friedman, second by Hoagland. So is there any commission questions for clarification at all? No? All right. I know that I'll go first. I know in the past we've done like a rating system, and you've used that. Did you use that same system again, or did you modify it, or how did that work this time?
Why don't you explain that, Shannon?
So in our request for proposals, we actually had a series of questions and actually had a scoring system that all the applicants were aware of. And so we, myself, Mr. Whitman, and Mr. Woodhall ranked those on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 20, depending on how the question was ranked. And so we do have a scoring sheet for the 10. Like I said, the top 4, there was a gap between the top 4 and the bottom 6. So we entertained inviting all 4 of those for an interview process. The interview process did have a scoring system as well, where initially the first 15 minutes they gave a presentation of their firm, and then we had a question and answer session that had a scoring system. So.
And now I noticed that in here we don't, do we normally have a, how is this paid for out of the budget? Does it come out of all the different utility funds, and how are we allocating that? Seems like in the past, has there not been a kind of an estimate of what that cost would be to the city over the year's period?
So, Mr. Chair, yes. So what we do is for the CIP projects, if you remember inside the CIP itself, we set off the engineering cost as it relates to those particular departments and what they would be spending. And so that's how we set off the engineering cost. Inside the Public Works operational budget, there's a line item for
Consultant or professional
services that is there for the different public works departments as well. That might be it might be engineering required tasks, but they're not related directly to the CIP projects. For instance, our crews have gotten very good over the last several years at building some of our own water lines. So we might ask the engineer to design 100 feet of water line on South F Street or something like that. Those funds will be spent out of the operational professional services line. So the numbers here, the numbers that would be spent for this contract are all within the budget in the CIP.
Okay. So, and the contractor is aware of what our limitations will be for each project that they undertake then?
Very much.
Okay. And we'll keep it within our CIP and budget.
That's their job.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Is there any public comment on resolution 4597? Yes, Patricia, come on up. for Patricia, while Patricia's signing in, so this will be the first time we've worked with this particular engineering company, is that correct?
Actually, Mr. Chair, the city of Livingston has worked with TD&H multiple times over history.
Okay.
We haven't worked really with them for the past 7 or 8 years until this past year. And then TD&H was the group that put together the preliminary engineering report for the downtown.
Okay.
Mr. Waring was involved in that.
Hi, Patricia. I know that I know you don't, just go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Patricia Grabo, 204 East Callender Street, Livingston, Montana. I have a couple questions of the city manager. We had previously discussed an $80,000 engineering project to design the streets on Callender between 2nd and B. Will this particular engineering firm then be hired to do that? I noticed you said something about CIP projects next year.
Well, I think that contract went to Staley.
No.
This is them? So what did we do at the last meeting with Staley?
We did an amendment to the design
The
contract
amendment.
for this
Right,
year's
so
project.
this will be TD&H.
TD&H, like I said, if the commission approves this contract tonight, we will start immediately tomorrow negotiating a scope of work and a contract price for designing next year's CIP project. Patricia is correct. We do have $80,000 in our budget to do that. And I'm very confident we can get that project done under that budget.
Thank you very much.
So this ties into a letter that was delivered by the building owners on Callender Street between 2nd and B, in which they asked a specific engineer who'd worked for the last 4 years for Butte to design their sidewalk basements. And my understanding of the commission's position on this was that the commission wanted to have a workshop with Butte and see what we were talking about when we talked about an underground. And I know the Downtown Building Owners Association has raised money to be sure that we could have Butte come over here for a workshop on that $80,000 engineering project. That tonight, the city manager is saying he would like to have it go to Thomas Dean and Hoskins rather than the engineer that we had specifically requested for this project. I think that it's very, very important that we be given that opportunity. The commission's made a commitment to let us have that opportunity. We could have the Butte person anytime that the commission wanted. And if you table this tonight, then we could have that workshop between now and the next city commission meeting, and you can determine whether or not the building owner's request had a different engineer do that particular segment makes sense to this commission. I think it's really critical. This commission did make a commitment on that, and we would so appreciate it if you would live up to the commitment that was made.
If I may, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember us making any commitment.
Mr. Chair.
I know that you put out the request, but I don't think at that time we actually took a vote or made a commitment, or did we? Commissioner Stern?
Thank you. So I don't think this particular motion ties directly to preserving the sellers. This is the city's engineer to do lots of different tasks. And I think your idea of getting a workshop you can get the folks from Butte over here to have a discussion with the relevant people about good affordable ways to save that underground. That's great, but I don't think that this particular resolution pertains to it. However, but if you can get And I don't think you're alone in wanting to save those underground cellars and making certain that the relevant building owners communicate that to this engineering firm to work on a solution is probably the right way to go. That's how I feel about that. So with respect to this engineering firm, this is the one that the administration chose. They got work to do. They went through their process, so I support it. And I see it as separate as saving that underground, which I think is useful, and this company will obviously be involved in that.
Well, my
I
understanding,
yield. Thank you.
thank you very much, Commissioner Stern. From what I am hearing the Public Works Director say is that they could start as early as tomorrow on that CIP project, that $80,000 project, prior to being able to meet with Butte. Now, I want to back up just a little bit because I don't want what's happened in the past to repeat itself. What happened in the past was Staley Engineering was the city's engineering company, and I can write a narrative on what happened, but the owners of the Bar Grill wanted to save their sidewalk basement, and the city just, Staley Engineering just put so many roadblocks, and they hired Kirk Michaels to save it. And I have the 15 emails between Kirk Michaels and Staley. And what happened was they put so many roadblocks that the owners of the Bar Grill could not save that underground. So perhaps something could be stated to, and in fact, the owners of the Bar Grill only paid $2,000. I have the email from the city manager. And according to Kirk Michaels, it took $15,000 at least to fill that in. And I asked her, well, who came up with the money to fill it in? And in fact, he said, take a look at the contract with the person who did the work on First Street, on the first block of Main. So I want that investigated, but.
Can I ask you one question? Before
Yes.
you go on? So your interest in your comment is to try to get the city administration, their new engineering company, to hear the engineering company from Butte and their
Yes.
expertise in this area.
Yes.
Does that seem like that's a problem if they came to town and were able to talk with people?
Mr. Chair, I don't think the administration has any problem if downtown building owners or anyone else wants to set up that kind of a workshop. We'd certainly be glad to attend and listen and learn. And we have no objection if the property owners themselves want to hire those engineers to design their vaults. If that's what they want to do, whether it's to rehab them or to fill them in. The city's position in the past has been that we don't do the engineering on the vaults. We have a $3,000 subsidy that we provide whatever happens to the vaults. And the contract tonight, as Commissioner Stern stated, is about hiring a city engineer. The contract that Mr. Holmes alluded to would be to negotiate a contract with, or a scope of work rather, with TD&H regarding the street design process, the $80,000 design process. If by that time there's the opportunity to incorporate some of this information into that process, we're fine. Although, again, I go back to, we don't design the individual vaults on private business. We're not going to do that. So, Shannon, was there anything you would add to that?
Yes. I could provide some clarification. First of all, I appreciate Commissioner Stern's comments because he is 100% correct. If you read our contract in front of you tonight, there are two types of projects that city engineer will do for the city of Livingston. One is a miscellaneous, and that's more of an on-call. If I have an issue that I need an engineer's opinion on, I can pick up the phone and call him and do that. The other is a task-based project, and those are our larger projects, and all those are typically included in our CIP, and that project would be the 2016 capital improvement project. So the process that I will go through is we will outline a scope of work, and they will put associated costs with those, and then we will bring that back in front of the city commission as a resolution, and that will be a standalone contract for that project.
Sounds good. So with the idea that the administration, the commission would be willing to listen to someone that you know, if you set it up, let the administration know what the date and time is.
Can we set a time now?
You already know what their schedule is.
I can certainly,
Sure.
Why don't you,
before the next,
Patricia?
how can we set up a schedule if they, for example, could come in a week?
Well, why don't you do this? Find out get several dates from them that they can be available.
Okay,
Let the administration know.
Okay.
And the administration can get the information out to the commission.
okay,
And that way we'll be able to coordinate our schedules.
okay. And there's one other thing that, of course, you are the commission, and this is person follows whatever you say. When the administration says, we do not design these sidewalk basements, I don't believe that's ever been a decision made by the commission per se. And I think it's a really important decision. What happened to Butte 15 years ago is they said, yes, we do. We actually design these sidewalk basements because it is the intention of the city commission that these are valuable to the community. Okay, so I think that's a really important issue, that if there's any way to bring it up at the next city commission meeting and make a decision on that, then that's a commission decision, not a city manager position. And if in fact you meet with the people from Butte and you find that it is, my understanding is it's case by case, but it is about half the cost. And as I say, in this case with the bar and grill, it looks like the city probably ate about $15,000 worth of cost in some form, because that retaining wall itself was right in that range. So we need to really clarify that. But if we could just have that policy decision made by this commission, that would be so appreciated if we could put it on the agenda at the next city commission meeting.
Right.
And that would be after we could meet with Butte.
I think that policy decision is going to revolve around, does the city commission want the city taxpayers to pay for the engineering costs? Or are we going to require the building owners to pay for their engineering costs? That's probably what it will revolve around a little bit.
Well, we have
But anyway, we
$80,000
will get it
worth
on.
of engineering costs.
This is not a discussion about vaults right now, but we will get it on the agenda for next meeting.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, Mr. Neese, do you need a motion to put that on as a discussion item? Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just quickly, in the process of
I'm sorry, sir.
in the process of hiring the engineer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you state your name?
Oh,
and
sorry,
address?
Sarah Sandberg, 111 South Fifth. So in the discussion of hiring the engineer through the RFQ process, it was stated that cost was not necessarily the factor. It was more on qualifications, I believe. So my question is, where was cost associated? And then I believe I heard from the parks, from Shannon, that they would, if the commission approves this, they would be offering the contract to the firm tomorrow and then be negotiating price. And I'm not sure how you negotiate price after you've offered someone a contract to do the work. My question then further down the road is, if you have a certain amount budgeted next year for engineering costs, when you offer a contract to these folks and then negotiate cost, if they come in too high, do you cut back the scope of work, or do you increase your budget line item because the cost may be higher than you had anticipated? Thank you.
Take a shot at it first.
Sure.
Fill in where I've messed up here. I think the contract is that we're approving right now is a contract for hiring a specific engineering firm to handle the city's engineering for all these projects and miscellaneous projects, where the bidding, each project is then bid separately. And the contractor does know what we have in our budget or scheduled for that particular project. And they know that they can bid under that or up to it.
I was referring to the fees of the, I thought it was the fees of the engineer that would be negotiated later after you hired them.
Mr. Chair.
Now, go ahead. I must have missed it.
That's okay.
Thanks, Sarah.
So, clarification there, and I apologize if I was unclear. Under the state of Montana's laws for hiring an engineer, we can't use cost as the only decision process. So it is a part of the evaluation process, and we have had negotiations with them about the charges that they're going to create, what their hourly rates are going to be, and what they're going to charge us for. We've had all those conversations, and we do know what those will be, but we can't, when we get RFQs in, the state forbids us from simply picking the lowest price and hiring that person. So it is one of the factors around which we evaluate, but not the only factor. We have negotiated those costs already. The costs, the projects are in the budgets and the CIP. And to go to your other question there for just a second. Just like when we bid the project from the standpoint of the general contractor, if the task of work from the engineer comes back and it is beyond the cost that we have budgeted for it, then we do a little bit of probably all of that. We will look for ways to reduce the scope of work. We'll look for things that we might be able to do in-house. We may negotiate further with the engineer that we think that's too much cost. Typically, one of the ways you get caught up in that is where they may place a higher amount, usually in the contingency fund, to want to leave a little bit more room, and so that will inflate the cost. So sometimes we'll take a look at that and reduce the contingencies. So we will do some of that negotiation. We do that both with the engineer as well as the contract, the general contractor, if there's room for that, depending upon the way that we set the document out. So if we bid the contract and we put 5 or 6 alternatives in there, then that gives us some flexibility to do that as well.
Sure,
So
I understand that.
I don't know if that answers your question.
I guess maybe I just need to ask the simple question, what's being negotiated after you hire the engineer? Their fees?
No, their fees have already been negotiated. What we're going to
Okay.
do
Thanks,
is
that's
we're going to
the
get a
answer to the
scope of
question.
work for this next project where they will say, once we've given them a scope of work, okay, based on what our fees are, this is what it's going to cost you for us to do that project.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment on resolution 4597? Any public comment on resolution 4597? Any other commission comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Chairperson Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Holden,
Yes.
Commissioner Stern,
Four.
Commissioner Friesen,
Four. Motion passes. Next resolution is resolution number 4600. A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, estimating the cost of maintaining and improving streets and alleys in furtherance of the 5-year capital improvements plan for Street Maintenance District Number 1 for fiscal year 2015-2016 in the estimated amount of $947,025, which is a 4% increase from the prior fiscal year, and levying and assessing 100% of the estimated costs against every parcel of property within said district for that part of the cost, which is assessable area fares to the assessable area of the district, and calling for a public hearing. Would you make these resolutions any longer? Thank you very much. Mr. Meeks.
Mr. Chair, as the City Commission is aware, every year we pass a resolution which sets out the costs to be borne by the street maintenance district. We have one street maintenance district within our community, aptly titled Street Maintenance District Number 1. For this coming fiscal year, it has a budget of $947,025. And Mr. Chair, this is also, I think about 2 meetings ago, we finished the process where Mr. Coate had us go back and adopt a new ordinance and update the capital expenditures that went along with that. This follows suit with that particular process. It is something that is collected as an assessment on property tax bills based on the square footage of the different parcels. That being said, Mr. Chair, I will entertain any questions that arise.
Do we want to start with the motion? The commission.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we make a motion that we pass resolution 4600.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Friedman, second by Hoagland. Is there any commission discussion, questions, clarification?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Stern.
it's important to note that this is indeed a rate raise, but the rate raise is $7 per homeowner per year. Small and necessary. That's all.
Any other commission discussion? Public discussion? Yes, Patricia, come on up. This isn't about the vaults, right?
It's okay to talk about them. It's our livelihood. It is how we survive as businesses. It's not a personal cause. It's just survival of businesses in our downtown area. And on this 947 specifically for the year fiscal year 2015 and 16, what specific is that the next phase of the CIP, or what is the property that's being affected by this?
Oh, you want to know what property the street maintenance funds are going to be used for this
Yes.
year?
Please.
I'll leave that up to administration to explain the specific streets that are going to be repaved and resurfaced.
Shannon, you want to talk about our street maintenance plan for this year?
Sure.
So if you look at your current budget, approved budget, we have $300,000 of this that's going to next year's project, which does consist of Calendar Street from B to 2nd Street and Main Street from Calendar, hopefully down to Clark. Lewis to Clark is going to be a bid alternate based on the amount of money we have, the contractor's bid. We have $40,000 slated for pavement overlays around town. One that comes to mind is the one block of Summit Street up between Main and B Street, where we removed the asphalt here a year and a half ago, and so that will be replaced. And that funds our annual chip sealing project, which we put about $25,000 to $30,000 in that, and certainly personnel, wages, salary wages, and things like that come out of this as well. So snow removal equipment. We're buying a plow this year in the approved budget. We got a sander in the approved budget. We have money for tires for our heavy equipment, things of that nature.
Shannon, so the maintenance is throughout the city?
It's throughout the city, widespread. Certainly anytime we have a water main break or we do any service repairs for our water system, the street maintenance pays for replacement costs of the street, sidewalks, curb and gutter, things that are affected by the construction.
That answer your question, Patricia?
Now, on this, to some degree, how have the building owners on Calendar Street and Main to Clark been notified that they are going to be carrying an additional tax burden on all of this? Because what he's saying that this is basically for next year, it's going to be Calendar Street from B, 2nd to B, and it's gonna be possibly on Main, from Main to Clark. Do the building owners even know this is going to happen? My understanding is they have not a clue.
Well, if I may, this assessment is for every, when we say street maintenance district 1, that's the entire city. So every parcel in Livingston is going to receive this tax increase.
And there would be no additional burden along Main and Callender?
No, this is an annual thing that the city has done for literally decades. We do it every year, and it funds our street maintenance repair efforts. It funds our CIP. It funds our street department. Everybody pays it on a per square foot amount based on the size of their parcel. So this is not anything new. This is an assessment that's been there for a long time. But this year there is a 4% increase in the assessment based on the larger budget of the street maintenance district.
Another quick question. Do the building owners between Callender and Clark know that there's a possibility that their streets could be done this year? Are they aware of that at all?
This is for next season.
For this coming season?
The coming season, meaning next spring.
Next spring and summer?
Go ahead, Shan.
So if you look in our city commission approved capital improvement plan, so there's a phasing plan on the last page that shows that area for construction next year. Our approved budget has it in there, and like I said, now that the city commission has approved the general services agreement for TD&H, I'm very excited tomorrow to get them started on that, and included in the scope of work is getting notification out to all the affected owners for that project. Not to take anything, but I did submit a draft letter that we were going to be submitting to those property owners that you will be receiving later on in the meeting.
Thank you very much. That answer your questions, Patricia?
That's answered the question, but that gets modified pretty quickly. For example, the Callender Street thing was modified, and there's people who were expecting last summer to have from Callender to Clark. And then of course it didn't happen, and it was shifted. So even though it looks like it's available in the CIP, the notice is pretty short for these people who have to come, whose businesses are affected by this entire process. That's a person on the city commission.
All right, thank you very much, Patricia. Is there any other public comment on where are we at now? Resolution 4600? Any other public comment on resolution 4600? All right. No other commission comments? Okay, we're good. Okay, roll call, please. Oh, excuse me. No roll call yet. We're up.
So Patricia, I understand your concern. I guess as far as a commissioner, I've only heard want of improving the streets as far as Main Street and different things. So the sooner the better. And most businesses are wishing that we had a better downtown Main Street, better, sidewalks, better. So if we have been negligent, I don't feel we have in our communications with the downtown and talking with them on what their need is. But I do take what you're saying seriously, and we'll make sure that we're very clear.
Thank you very much. Okay, roll call.
Chairperson Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Hopland,
Yes.
Commissioner Stern,
For.
Commissioner Brady.
Four.
Motion passes.
Mr. Chair, can we go back and do 4597?
Oh, you missed that, huh? Oh, excuse me. All right, well, thank you very much. All right, moving backwards. We have resolution 4597, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the city manager to sign an agreement with KMA Incorporated for professional architectural services for the City of Livingston Dispatch Center remodel. Mr. Meese.
Mr. Chair, as the city commission is aware, probably over a year and a half ago, we had to move the dispatch unit out of the space they had been in for several years upstairs. They actually located the room directly next door to the community room, and they have done a great job under those conditions. At the same time, it has been a goal for the city and the county commission to relocate them back to a permanent space. Given the recent relocation we did at the finance office to move them downtown, that opened a significant amount of space in the existing city offices to be split between both the police department and the dispatch center. This represents a slight increase in space for the dispatch center. It also will allow us the opportunity to professionalize the space a little bit more, make it a little bit more user-friendly and ergonomical. The first step in that process is to have a professional design done of the space. Kurt Michael Architects provided a quote and has worked with the administration to get the document that is here in front of you. Mr. Code has reviewed and revised that contract. As you will see on the fiscal note provided by Ms. Ho from the Finance Department, this is a cost of $4,060, and that entire amount is to be borne by the 911 fund. Just to be clear, the 911 fund are the state dollars that we receive that are held by county government, which we typically use for equipment types of projects within the dispatch center. And just put the ending reserve on that count, it's quite significant. So that the money is there to pay for this. This does not include any of the remodeling. That will have to be a separate conversation once we know what the project documents look like, if we get a bid, and we have a better idea of what our costs are going to be there as well. But this is just the first step in the process, and it's one that I'm sure the dispatch center is ready to move forward. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. All right, is there a motion from the commission on resolution 4597?
I make a motion, we pass resolution 4697.
4597. Okay. 4597. Thank you. Is there a second?
Good question.
I'll second.
So motion by Friedman, second by Hoagland. Commission discussion or questions?
The only statement is we've waited a long time for this, and so I'm excited to see it move forward.
Absolutely.
Mr. Friedman, any clarification? Commissioner Stern? Okay. Is there any public comment on resolution 4597? Public comment? So this $4,060, that's just for the architectural work. And also I read in here also that they may supervise. That
They would, there's potential for them to supervise construction if we move to that.
okay.
This is basically to do the architectural work, create bid types of bid documents, and get us through the bidding process.
Okay. And you mentioned here it was not a budgeted expense, and maybe later on we may require an amendment.
I would imagine, Mr. Chair, we would do a mid-year budget. This would be part of our mid-year budget amendment. Okay. Again, it's not a general fund item.
Okay, great. Okay. We do have a motion and a second, and everyone who wanted to comment has commented. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Bennett,
Yes?
Commissioner Copeland,
Yes.
Commissioner Stern,
Or
Commissioner Friedman,
Or. Motion passes. Resolution number 4601, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, of its intent to amend the budget for fiscal year 2015-2016 by making appropriation adjustments in the amount of $5,750 and calling for a public hearing. Mr. Meese.
Mr. Chair, So Resolution 4601 is the piece of legislation which would implement the salary increase that has been discussed by the City Commission, and that instructions were provided to the administration to bring this resolution back for further consideration by the City Commission. So we're certainly taking any questions that arise. Thank you.
All right. Great. So is there a motion from the commission on resolution 4601?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we pass resolution 4601.
Is
I'll
there a
second.
Motion by Friedman, second by Hoagland. Commission discussion? No. Is there a community input on resolution 4601? Community comment? Hearing none, roll call.
Chairperson Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Copeland, yes, Commissioner Stern,
Four.
Commissioner Freeman.
Four. Motion passes. Last resolution of the evening, resolution number 4602, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the city manager to sign a professional service agreement with Jesse Nuns for Livingston Commercial District Historic Resources Survey for fiscal year 2015-2016. Mr. Meese.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask Mr. Woodall to join us at the front of the room and perhaps give us a better explanation than I know I could.
Mr. Chair, I believe this item was discussed from the commission, at least as an information item, about a year ago. The Historic Preservation Commission has been working with the state. It's been the state's interest to get our historic downtown survey redone. It was not done to their standards originally back in 1979, and they would like it professionally redone. We don't have much of a budget. The Historic Preservation Commission receive approximately $5,000 in grant funding each year. And the Historic Commission is proposing that we commit those funds 1 year at a time for whatever length of time we need to accomplish the resurvey. The Historic Commission has voted on it and approved this idea and is requesting that this contract move forward.
All right, is there a motion from the commission on resolution 4602?
I'll make a motion to approve resolutions 4602.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Hoagland, second by Stern. Commission discussion?
Just a statement again. I've been following the historic district committee, in particular, some people on the committee, and I'm glad to see that we're moving forward with some improvements and changes.
Are we coordinating this effort with the capital improvements effort as well? Is there some type of coordination between?
Are you talking about the facade grant program?
No, I'm talking about the reconstruction, the infrastructure reconstruction that we just discussed, from B to calendar to B calendar to second.
And the Historic Commission actually regulates the appearance of the exterior buildings.
Okay.
So the infrastructure project is actually separate, but they are kept aware and engaged in what's going on and looking at anything that might affect that. Okay. But until we identify something, they're separate entities, separate projects.
Does the whole historic district take note of like the vaults at all?
They take note, they specifically discussed the hardware, the elevator doors, the imprints, that kind of thing, and are very interested in preserving those elements. But the actual space below, they have not weighed in on.
And I think this is goes along with this. So when you're talking about doors, elevators, maybe I've seen some sidewalks with glass. Are those things considerations for?
Yes, in fact, they will be communicating with the commission shortly, knowing that this engineering is what we're about. which elements are considered, you know,
Vital.
priorities for conservation, yes.
Okay. So that will coordinate with this next fiscal year's, I think that you guys will work together on that. And this $5,000, is that enough to do what you need to do for this particular year? Is that?
It's what the budget has, and we will, like I say, it's a multi-year project with the commission's consent each year.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this particular issue? Yes, Patricia.
Patricia Grabo, 204 East Caledonia Street, Livingston. Having been on the Historic Preservation Commission and a commissioner and had 16 years of caring what happened to our downtown. First of all, I need to tell you that I have tremendous respect for the cohesiveness of the study that was done in 1976. I read this, and my understanding of this particular Jesse Nunn possible hiring for a survey is primarily for the first block of Main and the first block of 2nd Street. Am I correct? They listed the buildings that are involved in this. I have a concern. So I will voice it because I had a lengthy meeting both with one of our car dealers and the president of one of the banks. They dream of putting a very large building, taking about $500,000 from the URA fund as money to give the incentive for this very large building that would be on the first block of Main, where the American Bank parking lot is now. And in order to move forward in this, they expressed to me that they needed to redesignate the historic designations of those buildings on, ironically, on the first block of Main and the first block of 2nd Street. Now, as the downtown building owners have a proposal, because it could be that the parking lot on the first block of Main that American Bank owns could come up for sale, could come on the market in order to facilitate this large project. Number one, I think a large project like that, if in fact what they're advocating is there, I think is frankly a disaster. Because one of the things that is the appeal of downtown Livingston is its historic character and its historic buildings. And putting a Bozeman-like imitation historic building is not appropriate for the original entrance to Yellowstone National Park. Secondly, I would be very cautious when it comes to this study because building owners are counting on the historic character of their buildings to finance all kinds of things like tax credits and so forth. And so I would be very cautious about this. I think this needs a lot more looking into because once those designations are changed, then a lot of things can happen for the people who own the building. In fact, I have a proposal that I put in and had discussion with the banker I was talking to and others where we would turn that, if in fact American Bank did sell that parking lot, it would be a dream to turn that into parking and a park and keep those gorgeous trees, which of course would be taken down if the banker's proposal was put into place. And allow for the kind of parking that we need for our downtown to open up all the buildings and a pretty viable parking plan. So what I would like to do is submit that proposal to the commission. I would like to, I would implore you not to, frankly, authorize this yet. I think it takes some looking into first, because there's a lot more at stake than is on the surface. And the proposal has been promoted to the URA to, give this so-called builder $500,000 if you already money. That's already come before the already board. So I really think this proposal has a lot of layers to it that I think even if you tabled it for one meeting, it would be greatly appreciated. So that we can have that discussion.
So, Patricia, I'd like to ask you a question. What do you think this study is going to do that would interrupt maybe what you're thinking of here? Jen, do you know of anything that I'm unclear about how you think the study is going to affect what you're talking about?
Okay. Well, all I know is what I read in the packet. I looked at the packet online. And in fact, it talked about, for example, the Owl Bar. There's a list of, can we get to that? Is it there?
That's it right there.
Okay, the Masonic Temple building, which was a hotel, an amazing historic building, and Masonic Temple, which was built in 1886. These are all remarkable historic buildings. And the owners of those buildings are very comfortable with the designation that exists for those buildings right now. I don't know why we would want to impose anything on those buildings by hiring somebody to take a serious look at this. To me, it's just something they don't know about. And it's just not American Bank, Al Bar. If you look at that, it's all First Street and Second Street. And that is where this banker had talked to me about getting a Bozeman-like building placed in that area. So I'm suspicious. And I just think it'd be a smart thing to allow some conversation with those building owners before this is passed.
I'm a little unsure. It sounds like what you're saying, that you think that their historic designation would change. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, it could conceivably
Is that
change.
even possible?
Yes.
It would be possible if there had been massive changes to the architecture. Highly unlikely in the case of our downtown. I think the only real change might be the addition of some structures as historic due to their age difference.
Mr. Chair.
You mean like adding,
So, Mr. Chair, and Jim, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the main purpose of what we're talking about here, as is called out in the document, is a historic resources survey. So when you have a historic district, one of the things that you're supposed to have is an inventory of the properties within that district. And that inventory is supposed to give you a very detailed description of architecture, masonry, construction materials, all of those types of things, age of the property, uses if they're known, any kind of historical resources and information that go along with that property. What Mr. Woodhull was alluding to earlier is when the first survey was done for this district, the state of Montana is not completely satisfied with how it was done and how it was structured. What we're attempting to do now is go back and do a better job. Is that a good way to put it?
Basically add to the documentation that we already.
Exactly. So if you've ever looked at the documentation, which I have, some of it's very incomplete. You might have, I think they call them a form of record. You might have a form of record that has the address, 2 or 3 pieces of information, and that's all you have. So what the city's attempting to do here is simply fill in the holes, get in there what we can find out, and do a better job of inventorying the properties. The goal here is not necessarily to try and change anyone's designation. It's just to get a good handle on what we have and build a database, if you will, of that information. Certainly, it's all done in concert with the property owners. They're the critical piece to getting a lot of that information. So there's no attempt here to do anything covertly, and nothing in this contract would affect whether a new parking garage goes up or doesn't go up, or whatever it is. This is simply a requirement of the state of Montana that we perfect the historic building inventory in our historic building district. That's basically what they're asking us.
I appreciate that clarification. The other thing, does it help the downtown, the Historic Preservation Commission has dreamed for some time of having signage. There are $300 signs that you can get for $25 from the SHPO. Does that facilitate that, Mr. Vidal? Their ability to put those signs up in those historic buildings?
If the sign program is still the way it was just a couple of years ago, the individual building owners of primary and secondary resources can request those and simply have them made by the state. I believe that's still an option, yes.
Okay. I did that for my building. It was a wonderful thing. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. All right, is there any other public comment on resolution 4602? Any other public comment? Resolution 4602. All right, we do have a motion and a second, and we have roll call, please.
Chairperson Bennett,
Yes?
Commissioner Copeland,
Yes.
Commissioner Stern,
Four.
Commissioner Friedman.
Four. Motion passes.
Mr. Chair, 4601.
Right, pass that one too? Now, what am I doing here tonight? Did we do 4601?
Yes.
4601, my bad.
Okay. Good catch on the other one, though. All right. All right, we're moving on to our action items. The first action item tonight is discuss the approve deny consideration of funding an additional school nurse for the Livingston School District. Mr. Meeks.
So, Mr. Chair, I can see in the audience that we have some representatives from the Livingston School District, as well as the Park County Health Department with us this evening. So I don't know if there's someone from that group that wants to approach the table in terms of making the presentation. Okay, Dr. Reed.
Genevieve Fried. And then, do you want my address?
Please.
6 Sioux Creek Trailhead. I have a little presentation, short presentation. Can I put that in?
Yes.
Oh, waiting for that. Has everyone voted? Is there anyone in here who hasn't voted? Okay.
What time's it close?
8 o'clock. 20 minutes. Okay.
For people who don't know me, I'm Genevieve Reed. I'm the new health officer in the health department. And we've revamped the health department since January, trying to look at holes that the community has in public health, where we should be filling the gaps for public health for Park County. And one of the gaps we have is in the school nurses in the county. If I, can you, or do you want me to come over there? I can do it.
Do you think, Genevieve, you could hold the microphone and talk into it so we can get it recorded?
Yeah, but I can't sit down while I talk.
If you want to stand up, why don't you move that chair in so you don't.
So the duties of the school nurses, I just want to go over this. People have actually asked me, well, what does the school nurse do anyway? The school nurses do a lot of things, and they really are focal points for public health for about, as I'll come to later in our community, for about 20% of our people of the community. So school nurses go over immunizations. They make sure that everybody's compliant. They let parents know when kids need immunizations. And we can provide immunizations, and we plan to start doing that this year. We do screenings, vision, hearing, dental, concussions, tuberculosis, head lice. They do communicable disease control and surveillance. Communicable diseases often begin in schools because kids are concentrated. Kids tend to carry more diseases. They haven't been exposed to these diseases yet. So when outbreaks occur, they generally occur in schools and nursing homes, daycare centers. School nurses, I think what we all think of when we think of a school nurses take care of acute illnesses and injuries and decide when kids should stay in school, when they should go home from school. School nurses also design individual health plans for kids with chronic illnesses, and we think of kids in school age as being healthy. They're not old, they don't have degenerative diseases, but we have lots of kids in our school now with type 1 diabetes, asthma, seizure disorders, depression, ADHD, all kinds of chronic illnesses that have to be managed while they are in school for 7 hours a day. The school nurses do medication management and identify problems that those kids are having with chronic illnesses. School nurses also provide health education and to the individual students and also for public health topics within the school. And they can help the schools develop protocols and policies. So just a couple of politicians talking about school nurses. A school nurse is the only consistent contact that millions of children have with a healthcare professional, yet half the nation's schools lack a full-time registered nurse. We need to make sure that all children have access to a nurse at their schools. And then another Democrat saying when children receive the support they need to remain healthy and focused on learning, the entire classroom benefits. Increasing the presence of school nurses in our schools can be a critical element in achieving this goal. So benefits of school nurse. These are proven benefits of school nurse, and these are done studies through lots of different organizations, but nursing groups have studied the outcomes. How do we benefit when we have an adequate number of school nurses? And attendance improves, academics improve, we have reduction in dropouts, time management improves because principals can do their job, teachers can do their jobs, and the nurses can take care of the sick kids and all the issues that we talked about. Staff wellness improves when you have school nurses in the classroom. Staff actually use nurses too, and just like a lot of big businesses have nurses on site because that does improve staff attendance or workforce attendance and workforce health. School nurses, for example, provide immunizations for teachers and staff. And then accountability. There are lots of areas where schools are required to stay accountable, and schools that don't have school nurses have much more issues with staying accountable with laws. Healthy People 2020 is a program through the CDC and other national organizations, and one of the goals for Healthy People 2020 is to get to a ratio of one school nurse per 750 well children. Well children. That's not counting big children with chronic illness, but we'll use that number just for a reference point to discuss. So where are we at now? The issue in Park County right now is disparity of care. So in the rural schools right now, we have 1.1 FTE school nurses. And those two women are serving Shields Valley, Arrowhead, Pine Creek, Gardner, and Cook City. The school nurse ratio now for those schools is 500 to 1 in 700 kids. Gardner has a young child with type 1 diabetes, and Gardner School is actually required to add more hours, so they're under the 1 in 750 ratio there. For those two school nurses, currently the county is paying between 2/3 and 100% of those school nurses' salaries. Benefits, transportation, everything. In the Livingston schools, right now we have 1.5 FTE, and we have a school nurse to student ratio of greater than, that should be greater than 1 to 1,000. And Livingston School District is paying 100% of those costs. Remember that schools get their funding per student, so Livingston School is relatively taking more money from kids' education to pay for school nurses than the rural schools are, because the rural schools have not been responsible for paying any of their school nurses. So what I would like to see happen, and a lot of other people would like to see happen this next year, is that we reshuffle a little bit how we're doing school nurses in this county, and that we continue the current ratio that we have in the rural schools. It has to be a little bit more because of some of the kids with chronic illnesses in the rural areas. But what we're going to ask, the county is going to ask, is that all schools in the county start paying 1/3 of the cost of their school nurses, and the county is going to continue to pay 2/3 of the cost for their school nurses. In the Livingston City Schools, we need to increase the number of FTEs in order to have enough school nurses to meet our goal, the national goal of having 1 nurse for every 750 students. We need to increase the FTE from 1.5 school nurses to 2.0 school nurses. Going forward, we would propose that the school district will continue to cover that 1.5 FTE, and the city and the county pick up the remainder of that cost. If Park County pays 1/3 of the remainder, we would pay the county another $10,000 or $10,000 towards that 0.5 FTE. We're asking that the city of Livingston pay $20,000 towards that remaining 0.5 FTE. Any questions about those numbers before I go on? Okay. So who should pay for public health? Who benefits from public health? Nobody has a mandate to pay for public health or for school nurses. There's not even a law that we have to have school nurses. There's no mandate that the school has to pay for school nurses, the city has to pay for school nurses, or the county. Nobody has that mandate, so who should pay? So everyone who benefits from school nurses should be covering the cost. And this is just a map of public health and how we think about public health now, but public health is not a tree like we used to think of, the branches coming down. It really is a network. And how we fund that network really needs to be from multiple entities in a cooperative and collaborative approach. All levels of government should be assisting with this, with school nurses, in my opinion, because everybody benefits. The state benefits, the county, the city. So the city of Livingston has an obligation to protect the health of its citizens. They pay for ambulance, fire, safe sidewalks. I mean, it's all about public health, right? And over 20% of the city's citizens are currently enrolled in public schools. That's it.
Is there any other public who would like to comment on this? Yes, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. And then you have to sign. Dr. Reed, could you sign in there as well, please?
Rich Moore, 113 South 5th Street. Appreciate your time, Superintendent of Livingston School District. Dr. Reed did an excellent job in hitting the points. I just want to take a moment to highlight just a couple of the critical issues. One, she said, whose responsibility is this? Isn't this a school problem? Why are we being, bothered and petitioned for city funds to help us out here? Public health is everyone's concern. Public schools, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Reed, is the only group in our county who monitors and enforces immunization in our county. They make sure that every child has the minimum amount of immunizations. They are spending a lot of time right now making sure that they are updated with the new immunization requirements that the state has passed. The state did not give us any additional funding for that new mandate. How are our nurses doing that with their existing time? We're using emergency school funds to give them some additional hours to cover that. Those monies are not there that we can continue to do that. Park County, I was looking at some information. I believe that Park County is one of the least immunized counties in the state of Montana, in the country. Thank you. It is a concern. Where do we monitor outbreaks best? In the schools with our nurses. We have 2 outstanding nurses that work very hard. They're very efficient with their time. Again, I believe this is a community effort, public health, and would ask that you would join with the county to support that health effort. I do know that we have some others here. Our nurses are here. Vern Beefert is here. Our high school principal is here, and others. They may want to take as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on this subject? Hi.
Vern Beefert, One Island Park Drive. I'm here in my capacity tonight as the Director of Special Services for Park County. That means I work with teachers and specialists to provide service for children with disabilities. I've also been here for many years in Park County, 28 years now, watching especially what's been going on with the nurses, evolving from one nurse when I first arrived here to eventually getting up to 1.5 right now. Part of the reason that I come tonight is because I work closely with the nurses and see they're unable to get their jobs done anymore within the hours they have to meet the mandates that are put upon us by the state legislature. As Dr. Moore just mentioned, the recent requirements for immunization updates have required many man hours to be able to get all of the immunizations up to speed and protect all of us. The other thing that I watched is the number of children who have significant health needs in our schools. And we have some children with very, very serious conditions, from epilepsy to diabetes and so on, that we did not have before. The required daily monitoring of blood glucose levels, training of everything from bus drivers to playground aides to make sure that those children are safe at all times. And we're just feeling stressed in being able to provide those services. So what I would provide for you as a city commission is the fact that definitely the nurses are needed. The principals really appreciate the services they provide. And I think the parents definitely benefit from knowing that their children are well cared for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who would like to make some comments on this issue? If you do, just please come on up. Sue, come on up.
My name is Susan Harriman, 604 East Oakley Way is my address. And I am a part-time school nurse for the district, and I feel very stretched. Just a few numbers, I don't know. We have 7 type 1 diabetics in the district, the youngest being the first grader, who needs a lot of help. Two students with severe seizure disorders, severe anaphylactic allergies, children if they're exposed to the something that they could have an anaphylactic shock. Many of those. I have 13 food ones, 11 view ones, many miscellaneous. There's asthma. There's just all kinds of things, and all of these kids with health problems require healthcare plans, contacting doctors, communicating with teachers. It's a big job, and personally, I just feel real stretched doing it. So that's it.
Appreciate it. Anyone else who would like to provide comment?
Lynn Scalia, Principal, Park High School, 220 South E Street. Whether kids are 5 or they're 18, if they're sick or they're in pain, they're not learning. Today, Mrs. Harriman was at our faculty meeting at the high school. She took the bulk of our time in our faculty meeting to talk about kids with healthcare plans and what staff needed to do should a student fall down in the hallway because of a seizure disorder, or if you're on a field trip. I've been in education for over 25 years in Montana, and the number of students who need health plans have grown exponentially. We're a community where at least 50% of our kids are at or below or slightly above the poverty line, and so the sorts of problems that the nurses are seeing are not what your kids would be showing at school. So yes, these services are really needed.
Very much. Anyone else would like to provide some insight or comments? Go ahead and state your name and address for the record, Brenda.
Brunlow, 488 Frontage Road East, also the CEO of Livingston Healthcare. And we just offer our support, and I have my support for this proposal or any alternative proposals where we can also be a partner in this important issue. Because I think we've all recognized the need in this community and that there are large health disparities, especially for kids that need it most. It's just the reality that unless you go to them, they're not going to get the care and the help that they need. And so it's just a realization that, they're generally, for those needs, they may come to Livingston Healthcare in a more acute condition. But for the basic needs, preventative needs that they need, and the care management that they need, we have to go to them. And so Livingston Healthcare, and I just offer our support for this.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Ryan Regard, 812 River Drive, and I just would like to speak as a parent in the school district. And I have 2 children, and I think that we all recognize there's a need, and we've heard from the school district and the healthcare. And I would just like to further along with the business community. We talk about these kids aren't learning, and so if they're not in school, they're not learning, they're not graduating, and they're not being productive members of this community, and they're not paying taxes. And so I think it's essential that we get these kids the help that they need, the teachers the help that they need, and the administration of the school the help that they need to do this, so we can get productive members of society in Livingston.
Thank you. I want to chuckle a little bit. You got it right for the taxes. Thought you're going to get us with that one.
James, I know you.
Anyone else who would like to make comment?
I talk about tennis. 514 North 10th Street. I have been an educator, or was an educator in the Livingston School District for 30-some years. And I didn't need the nurse very often, but when I did, she was always in some other building or some other place, and it took extra time, especially if it was an emergency, for that nurse to get to where the emergency was. So hopefully nobody said that already, but because I got here late, so thank you.
Thank you very much. You have something to say, don't be bashful. Come on up.
Who are you? I'm Clint Tinsley. Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to have you at a city commission.
Yes, this is a struggle for sure. Thank you guys for hearing all of this. I cannot talk to the Park County Commissioner because I didn't ask the commission if they'd let me do that. So I'll talk as a citizen of Park County with a daughter in school and seeing the health department and what's been done in this last year since January. Really amazing what the health department has done with everything. They're very aggressive, energetic. They absolutely wear me out, in fact. So any additional funding we can give would be appreciated. I think it's a great thing for all of the community, all the kids in Park County, and I appreciate your thought on this.
Thank you very much. We're doing okay. It's only 8. We can still talk. We'll try to wrap it up by 9:30 tonight. Anyone else on this particular subject? Okay. So, is there any commission discussion, clarification, thoughts, inspirations? Commissioner Freeman?
I just wonder what the administration's thoughts on this particular, just as it went before, that we have to address each other, and like city manager talking about that.
Well, do you mind if the commission comments first? You good?
Fine.
Okay. Commissioner Stearns?
I'll hold my comments in advance for a moment.
All righty. I know you want to recuse yourself, but you can certainly comment.
I'm not accusing. I'm just disclosing that I'm an employee of the school system, so I need to say that. One statement I do have to make is, the reference of 20% of our children are impacted by this, by a school nurse. I believe it goes way beyond that, as someone who watches it every day. I think that 20%, is the children, but we impact way more than the children. We deal with the families and deal with the health of the community in general. And I think it needs to be acknowledged that it's way bigger than just the nurse taking care of a cut. Way bigger than that. And having worked with them, they're wonderful, phenomenal women that work for our district. So I'd like to hear also from Ed some of the thoughts on this.
At least for me, I'd like to discuss this even a little further, even past tonight, because it really is a budgetary issue. $20,000 out of our budget is going to need to be something that we're going to have to discuss and figure out if we move in this direction. I guess my only thought is that it sounds like we're in essence kind of breaking new ground for communities in Montana, because my understanding, at least at this point, is that this is not something that cities normally fund. But I'm not sure. Genevieve, do you want to comment on that? You look like you're ready to jump in there.
I have not been able to find a city in Montana that is doing this currently. I was told that Belgrade was doing this, and after Ed responded, I looked into that more, and Belgrade is not receiving city funding, so I was mistaken on that. This is, though, a national trend, and I would just say the same with the response from who did this?
Mr. Mogan.
Mr. Mogan's response is really, are we going to sink down to the median, or are we going to lead the way in being an innovator and creative, progressive in our funding for community health? And I think in order to do that, everybody has to do their part, and it can't just be one entity doing funding. But other examples, entire states where this is common practice are Massachusetts, Missouri, Texas. There are lots of states where this is common practice for cities to participate in school nurse funding. And some of those areas in big cities actually completely take over the school nurse funding.
Again, my interest is trying to figure out where this is going to come from if we move this direction. So it's going to, I personally don't think I'm ready to vote on this tonight. I'd rather have some more discussion on it and do some more research. Is that a question?
No. Are we still?
What? I'm sorry,
Can
what?
we still take public comment?
Yes. Oh, yeah. You want to comment? Yeah. You can comment anytime. Just make sure it's between.
Again.
Okay.
We spent almost $25,000 to spray down our sidewalks this year. We moved $100,000 MUA funds for the city CIP program, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but we also raised taxes tonight. We spent like $55,000 on internet service. We spend this kind of money on the smallest of things, and $20,000 that we're asking to help 20% of our population seems really minuscule. It seems like that we can readjust our budget multiple times throughout the year for things that we find appropriate, and I think we've heard, and I hope you hear more, that this is a needed thing. And so when we talk about $20,000, it's nothing when you consider the whole budget. And I do believe that you guys can find a way to come up with that funding. That's it.
Yeah, Ryan, I think the only thing I was saying is I want to think about it and discuss it. It's not that I don't think this is not important. I didn't say that. As everyone who is an administrator or on a board, you're going to think about it and figure out how you're going to do it. There's no one here that's going to rush into making another appropriation. And all those things you did mention were all specific city functions that we do all the time every year. This is brand new. So that's something I want to personally consider thoughtfully, because once we do this, it's going to be a budgetary item for every year. And that will be something that every commission after us will have to appropriate every year. So please don't take my comments as something that is in a negative light, that I'm not interested in this. I want to think about it and figure out it and do it thoughtfully. Yes, Ben.
Brent Lowe, Livingston Healthcare. This issue is extremely important to us, and we believe we have a responsibility for the community's health, and we're willing to split that 3 ways, and so do at least 10,000 from Livingston Healthcare.
Thank you, Brent. Making our job easier.
I was hoping you'd say that. I was.
Mr. Meeks.
Mr. Chair, so I want to start this evening by saying I'm a big fan of school nurses. And I mean that. I mean that seriously, because I grew up as an epileptic from the age of 3, and I spent a lot of time in the school nurse's office. And so the school nurse is a very important position. I understand what it does. I understand the importance of our vaccination programs. And like I said, I'm a first-hand consumer, probably more than most of school nursing services. And I certainly appreciate Mr. Lowe's offer to come to the table with a third of the funding, because certainly that helps. I would say that the administration is generally not in support of this proposal, and I want to be very clear why. First off, I don't think it's a good policy decision for our organization. I think it's a great program, and I think the school district should work very closely with Park County to increase the funding that they're providing to the Livingston School District, similar to what they're providing to the county. And it would be great to see Livingston Healthcare come on board at that partnership as well. The reason I don't think it's a good policy decision for our community, for our organization, is because this is not what cities do. It's certainly not what cities do in any state that I'm familiar with. Now, I've never practiced in Massachusetts, Missouri, or Texas, but in Kentucky and Montana, public health and these types of issues are the purview of either county government or, in this case, school government. I heard the comment made several times earlier this evening, first, that public work health is everyone's concern and that everyone should do their part. So I'm going to go back to this fallback that I talk about a lot, but I don't want you to hear me. When our citizens pay a property tax bill, they pay it to county government, they pay it to city government, and they pay it to school government. So when we enter into a 3-way partnership, our citizens are in some proportion paying for the same service 3 times. I think that's more than their part. And what we would have to do is take funding from our general fund, our property taxes, to cover this service. Now it's $10,000, and the argument can be made, well, how can you argue with $10,000? Well, I have to argue with $10,000 because while as great a program as this is, it's not the last kind of request that we might get. And I think it's very, and so for me, it's very important. It's always been part of my philosophy that cities stick to their core knitting as well as we can, do those things we do well, and leave other things to the folks that are responsible for those things. And so again, I just want to go on and say, big fan of school nurses. I think it's a great program. I think it works very well in our school system. I'm the parent of 2 kids that have been through this school system. And I know Edison did quite a bit of concussion testing over the soccer program that he participated in. All I'm saying is that I don't feel like it's an appropriate step for the city to be involved in funding this particular program. I'm all for Clint up in the county contribution and for Brent jumping in as a partner, but I would find it difficult. I did contact my counterparts in Belgrade, Billings, Bozeman, Columbia Falls, Great Falls, Helena, Laurel, Lewistown, Miles City, and Whitefish, and none of them fund school nurse programs, and none of them have been asked to fund the school nurse program. To give you an idea of where our local school nursing program is, which I think is excellent, I'm going to distribute this map here. There should be some extras when we get done. This is a map of the school nurses across the state of Montana. I believe it's from the Montana School Nurse Association. Montana Association of School Nurses, yes, correct. And what you're seeing is...
Can everyone hear him in the back?
What you're seeing on this map, and there are some extras there, any place you see white are counties without school nurses. Any places that you see the light greenish color are counties that have school nurses, and you'll see the corresponding ratios over here on the left-hand side. And then the dark green counties are those counties that meet or exceed the national standard. Now, this is 2012 information, but it's the most recent I can find. The 3 counties that exceed are Sweetgrass, right there at the top, Glacier, and Mineral County. Those 3 exceed the national average, or those 3 exceed the national average for the state of Montana. So again, I cannot argue with the need for and the impact of school nursing. I simply don't feel like it is an appropriate step for the city organization to participate. That being said, Mr. Chair, at some point tonight, I do have a couple questions for Dr. Reed, just to fill out my understanding of her proposal. So whenever that's appropriate, if I can.
You want to make your comments now?
I want to fill out the rest of the information from Dr. Reed.
Dr. Reed, you got a moment? Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Reed. I guess a couple of questions that I was unclear about. The request for this funding, do you see this as a continuous ongoing request? Do you see this as the city and the county and the partners are providing an initial set of funding and then there's a taper off and then the project belongs completely to Livingston School District, or is this like in perpetuity type of thing?
I would hope that it would be in perpetuity until we had another plan. And the variables, however, are that we'd like to keep that ratio at 1 to 750. So we have an increase in the student population, and I think we will need to seek other sources for funding. And if there's a decline, then funding needs would decrease.
So what is your urgency? What's the time frame for this? Are you looking to start this program in this fiscal year, or are you looking to start it with the next school year? What is your...
Well, the school budgets are all made. So I think that we would start it as soon as we could, depending on when people came in. So maybe we could be able to start it halfway through the school year if possible, or possibly in the 2016-17 school year. I'd like to see it start halfway through the school year if we could. We also have to decide how we're going to actually do this with funding, if we are going to just give this funding to the school district for them to increase their FTEs, or if we're going to create another FTE position at the county. But I would think that we would end up giving this to the school district and they would increase the time of their school nurses.
Chair, I think that's all I've got right now. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm fully in support of filling this funding request and will do what I can to do so. There's an obvious need in the community for school nurses. The children are the lifeblood of the community. All the citizens are. And there's an obvious need, as pointed out by Dr. Reed, and this need is especially severe in our community. The city government mandate is to maintain the public health, safety, and public welfare. Health and public welfare fall under the school nurse. The health is the very first one. And gaps exist in our public health, gaps that need to be filled. Thank you for Dr. Reed for all the work you've done on the County Health Board and for identifying this need. My wife is a community physician, a family physician, and we know as a family that Livingston has a need for these services. And we also know as a family that prevention is much, much cheaper than intervention. It's much cheaper to stop a problem before it becomes exacerbated. That's a classic principle in healthcare, mental health care, all sorts of things. The city manager said that's not what cities do. That's the county's responsibility. I find that to be a false distinction. I don't think it matters what other cities do or do not do, or what other states do or do not. What matters is that we have a need in our community. We've identified an important need. We've identified a solution. We've identified a way that all of us can come together to solve that. I think that far outweighs any categorization any categories we can lay down, or any distinctions or any precedents from other communities. What matters is that there's a need and we found a solution. It's an important need. The funding, they're asking for $20,000. All right, let's look at the budget. We have $608,000 as reserves on our general fund, out of which this would come. That's 14.15% of the expenditures. So the budget, as put here, did not have 2 months, didn't have 16%, it had 14%. We started with 14.15%. The $20,000 is 0.45%. So we would decrease our reserves by less than 0.5%. We just approved the budget amendment for the increase in pay for the city commissioners to the tune of 0.15%. So the city commissioners are taking 0.15% from the reserves. Ms. Rivard is correct. Those sorts of funds do get spent often on all sorts of things. And there are many places here in the budget that we could go through, and we could, there are many gymnastics to play with the budget. There's the administrative, in the administration, there's the Prosperity Yearly Support. We could decrease that. There's some of the professional services. There's $7,500 allocated for the Civic Center. We could decrease that a little bit. There's a zillion items in this budget where there's flexibility. And we could just take the funds out of the reserves, just like we did for the increase in pay for the city commissioners. So, okay, so there's the need. The funding is actually not that great. The funding request is not that large. It does not make a very large impact in our budget. And then there's the whole community's coming together. The CEO of LHC just came forth to offer more. The county presented a letter, it's in the agenda packet, and it's signed by Dr. Reed and all 3 county commissioners pledging to increase their allocation by $10,000. So I see this as an opportunity for the city and our responsibility, and the fact that prevention is so much cheaper than intervention means that this is really the most fiscally responsible way to go. So I fully support this. And I think what we have to do is we have to come together, which is what we've all done here, and we have to make this happen. So that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we direct the administration to bring back a resolution approving the allocation for the school nurse to the tune of the original $20,000. Is it $20,500? What was it? To $20,500. So there's the motion.
Can we get together with the hospital and come up with a number and what they're willing to contribute as a community member and amend it?
I'd be open to that.
How do we do that?
There's a motion on the floor, there needs to be a second to move forward.
I'll second the motion to move this forward, but I'd like the numbers to be clear to vote on.
Well, if we want the numbers to be clear, I think we're going to have some more discussion.
Mr. Chair, I mean, if what Commissioner Hoagland is asking, if she wants the administration to meet with the hospital and discuss, and the county, and discuss how we might revamp the proposal based on the information that's below shared tonight, we're certainly going to do that. Come back, if we could table this with the motion in a second, come back at the next meeting, and we could provide that information to the city commission. We could take a vote at that time.
Could I ask a question, or is it not my turn anymore?
One second. So can we amend the motion to say, require you to bring to us numbers that are approved, will be approved by the commission. The concept is approved by the commission, or up to approval by vote of the commission with the numbers brought to us at the next meeting.
So Commissioner Hoagland, I mean, certainly I think Mr. Cope probably could provide more comment on that as well, but I would say rather than get into a complicated motion, we probably, if you want to wait to the next meeting, you're probably better off just table tonight. Let us do that work and bring something back and then deal with it as part of this action item. So I don't know where.
Can you do it like not to exceed, that you'll approve it not to exceed a certain amount? Because if Bren is willing to chip in 10 grand, is that what I heard, Bren? Yeah. Show your card, your option card. If he's willing to chip in 10 grand, then you could do not to exceed, say, $11,000 and, or yeah, $11,000, and we'd be there.
I would be willing to amend the motion to make it $11,000 and then take a vote tonight. Would that be okay? Okay. Motion to amend this.
Okay, commission discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could I have one more moment?
Yes.
So, Mr. Chair, I want to be clear. My primary objection to this is not that it's unreasonable for our budget. I do think we can find places to spend it in the budget. I'm just going to make the point again, though, that our folks have paid for this 3 times if we do this, number one. Number two, just as bad as we need a school nurse, we need 3 more firefighters. I'm not going to go to anybody else and ask them to pay for our firefighters. We have other needs across city government that are just as important to public safety and public health as the school nurse is. And that's what I'm saying, is I think that that it's important for the city to recognize our core mission and those things that we do well. I don't believe this is part of core mission. It's not that I don't like school nurses. It's not that I don't support public health. I obviously support all of those types of things. But I think once we start down the slope where we're not supporting core mission, we get off into the weeds and we start doing a lot of things that cities really don't do well and aren't intended to do. Public health, the type of public health we're talking about tonight, is really a county-wide issue. And that's why it's dealt with county governments across the country. That's why county government takes care of the public health department. And the school districts, for the constituents that they serve, take care of the health services within their district. Certainly, if it's the prerogative of the city commission, the commission votes, we'll do this as well as we can do it. I just want to clarify and make sure that it's understood. I don't really think this is a budget issue. This is a mission issue. And it's about us doing the things that we do well for the rest of the community and other folks doing what they do well and bringing that to the table. And so thank you, Mr. Chair.
We do have a motion on the floor. Commission discussion. Commissioner Friedman?
Tough one. There's no question there's a need for this. It's a precedent problem, so. I don't know. That's all one. There's no question I need support. We started precedent with this and other things as we go forward. So I think this has to be dealt with. It's not an unreasonable request. I'd like to have further comment on it.
Commissioner Stern?
I think my stance on that.
Commissioner Holman?
I know Ed and I have disagreed on what cities do. And I think this is something that cities should do. As well as we've put insulation into the senior center. We are helped funded with URA. We've done many things as a city that maybe aren't as conventional, but I think we're doing a good job at looking this as that made the whole village concept. I think it's a great idea.
Well, you're forcing me to vote tonight, which I really don't want to, which is fine. I'm not ready to vote on this. I will vote no, just because I'm not ready to, I need to get this more thought. I have to agree with Ed on this one. I think there's a lot of things that people need from the city that we do. The library needs money from us. There are departments within the city, fire, police, who are waiting in their budget for yearly allocations of their monies that come out of the general fund. And it's a great project. I'm not ready to vote on it, but if you're forcing me to, I'll vote no. Any other public comment before we go? Yes.
Warren Beatty, 310 South 8th Street. I think the real question is not the money. I mean, 2-3 years ago, you found $12,000, I think, by deciding whether the city should buy a riding mower or a sniper rifle. So it's really the precedent. Will this set, I mean, that's a question, I don't know. Will it set a precedent that's going to cause problems further down the road? And that's, I think, the question. It's not a question of the $20,000. It's purely precedent. Obviously, it's a worthwhile thing to do. Once that's settled, and I think it should be settled before any vote's taken, to decide whether that does set a something down the road that's gonna be a real problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Moore.
It sounds like it's coming down to precedent. I have a difficult time believing that the commissioners are not intelligent enough to look and weigh each issue by merit. If something else comes along, you're going to weigh it, look at it, see if it is the right fit for the city, and vote accordingly. Each issue stands alone. Just because you vote for this particular request does not mean that you are set for the rest of your term in office to vote a certain way on any other issue. You're intelligent. You make those decisions one at a time. So I don't see the concern that has been expressed on setting a trend or precedent. This is, as Adam Stern very well articulated, this is a community. Dorrell mentioned this is a whole village. So is the community's health worth it? Worth the 10,000? Thanks very much, Bren. I was very generous, unexpected, very generous. Boy, this sounds like a great deal to me, and I would encourage a vote and support.
Thank you very much. Patricia?
Patricia Grable, 204 East Challenger Street. I spent 20 years as a school principal and teacher, and I have seen school nurses save children's lives. I don't know how much a child's life is worth, but I've actually had kids also come to school with a broken foot, and the school nurse was the one that was saying that the boyfriend did beat the girl and she did break her foot. I mean, what teachers and principals see over a long period of time is remarkable, from the kind of performance that school nurses actually, the services they provide really have no price tag. When you talk about setting a precedent, right now, this evening, this commission is setting policy. You're the policy setter, not the city manager. We have a hospital that stepped forth. What a precedent that our hospital stepped forth and said, okay, we've got three bodies right now. We've got the city, we've got the county, and the hospital. And if we can take advantage of this precedent, we are leading the way in the state of Montana. We're not just following whatever norm that is below average. We're doing a great job for those children that matter in all of our lives. They have no price tag. But this is a great precedent. And if this commission would just have the wisdom to vote for this tonight, I think it'd be remarkable. And I can't even thank the hospital enough for stepping forth as a partner on all this. That is unique. And we should research how often that happens in the country.
Anyone else?
Jay Keeper, 13 Riverside Drive, Livingston, Montana. A friend of mine sent me an email, and I think it's so apropos tonight on there. I just have one thing to say there. Instead of thinking outside of the box, pretend there is no box. And that will, I think this will help you in your decision making. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. So just to respond to two comments that were made. One is the precedent.
If we do this, where will it lead? I don't think it'll lead anywhere other than school nurses. And we do reevaluate the budget every single year. And so if for some reason the difficulty is so great that we can't move forward, then, you know, the budget does get reevaluated every year and that decision can be made then. And balanced against the other needs of the city. The other statement, my other comment is towards James's concern that you haven't had time to think about that, and I totally understand that. However, this is not the final legislation. This is just the action item directing the administration to bring back a resolution. And the resolution would go through one reading, two readings? One reading on this. So it'll at least come back, it'll come back one more time, presumably in 2 weeks. And that's the resolution that actually commits the funds. So this just gets the process going. And I totally understand you wanting to take some time and think about it. But just voting for this now doesn't necessarily preclude that. And voting for this now doesn't necessarily preclude that. But those are my comments, and I appreciate the concerns. I still think that this is a tremendous need of our community. I'm glad it's identified, and I think we have a really good solution. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Yes.
Jill Mabey of 310 South 8th Street. I'm a retired critical care nurse, and I can't tell you how important to every nurse, we learn this in school, just educating the public is. The lives that would be touched by this and could be saved down the road. It isn't just the children, it's the children's families that will be touched and educated through this process. And that is huge. It's huge. It's a lifetime of influence that you're going to have on the children and their families and whoever they touch. Education is so important with these kids, and to have someone that they can go to is, it's hard for me to struggle with words. You can't put a price on that. I would welcome setting this precedent, whatever it is. I think it's a wonderful thing to do for such a small price.
Roll call. Make the motion.
I move to direct the administration to bring back a resolution to allocate funds for a school nurse in the amount not to exceed $11,000. In the amount of $11,000.
Chairperson Bennett.
No.
Chairperson Hoagland. Yes. Chairperson Stern.
Four.
Motion passes. Okay, next discussion item. Discuss. Yes. Sure. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you. Yeah, right.
You owe me. I think that was 25 cents.
I just see like
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I have some of those pictures.
You could extend that subscription.
Yeah.
I have a just like those old, yeah, the old timey photos you had and stuff. I can see, yeah, you appreciate that. Yeah. That's a, it is, yeah, it is. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I just. People still, I should have clarified that they got one motion, like one reading. It was pretty small. We don't do. Jim, I was on top of the last. I did touch the bear before, I put a rock. She got covered in bear. Unfortunately, touch the bear, we got berries. We have these white, people care like they're made white. I try to spread like onions. And you ask me the fish and game that, white is but if I'm like, I'll go with the no, sorry, there was environment. Thing our I can see it later. It's an environment with dirty guys. To be honest, no, I might be wrong. We should check. Yeah, I'm glad. Hey, so my ticket's not online. I could get out and stuff like that. No, I'm on. I don't know that one.
You sent it to us, I read it in an email.
We need to discuss this tonight.
Yes.
Maybe you want to move.
I do.
You did. Yes, I know that I read it as far as I think I got both positive.
I was going
All right, we are now back in session.
Let's talk about the process.
I'm wondering if we can table action item B. Is that okay with the commission?
Oh, that was, it's not even supposed to be on. Can I just give 2 minutes of explanation?
Okay.
All right, so, action item B is talk about, making the Waterworks Park an off-leash dog area. And it's not supposed to be on the agenda. What that is we talked about that at the last Parks and Trails Committee meeting, and the committee wants to move forward with a discussion Obviously, making a park an off-leash dog area will invite lots of community comments and involvement. And so the Parks and Trails Committee thought it best to formally announce that discussion is going to happen at the next Parks and Trails Committee meeting, which is the 4th Wednesday of this month. And hopefully they'll put something in the newspaper, and then we'll have that community discussion at the meeting. And then after that discussion, the Parks and Trails Committee will hopefully make a recommendation and send that to the commission. Mike, did I get that right? Yep. And I got some minutes for the meeting, if you want to go over them with me after this meeting, do over a few fine points. So, tabling that is just fine.
Okay, sounds good.
6:30, 4th Wednesday.
23rd.
Okay, we do have an addendum for tonight. We'll take that first. Addendum item D, discuss approve tonight funding for possible purchase of right-of-way property from Dan Durgan. Mr. Meese.
Mr. Durgan, there he is. Mr. Durgan, I'm going to come to the front of the room. So at a previous city commission meeting, Mr. Durgan, at a previous city commission meeting, Mr. Durgan had made scheduled public comment during which he explained his ownership of a piece of property within our community, a piece of property which would be necessary and involved with the potential construction of a railroad underpass project which the city has been working on. The city commission offered a few questions and then asked Mr. Durgan to come back as an action item where there can be a more involved conversation. And so he is back this evening. In preparation for tonight, I prepared and delivered a memorandum to the city commission just sort of summarizing our relationship to this point, as well as a drawing that Dow HKM provided of how this piece of property is impacted by the potential railroad underpass project. That being said, Mr. Chair, I would entertain any further comments from Mr. Durgan or questions from the city commission.
Now, how many got a chance to review this addendum item?
Where's the memo that you referred?
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, there was a memo and there was a map and it was attached to an addendum item that Ms. Harrell prepared. This was originally posted for tonight's meeting and was missed when the agenda was put together. So on Thursday. So Commissioner Hoagland, did you get
I
it?
did. I even read it today, so I can't remember where. It's on my computer. So.
And Mr. Chair, you're saying you did not receive it?
I'm sure I missed it. I just flipped through my computer. Could you please very briefly just summarize the technical details
Sure.
of the memo?
Sure, absolutely. So, Lisa, can you bring the memo up? You don't have it? Okay. I'm sure. Okay, so sure, I can do that. And Mr. Durgan, you correct me if I'm getting off in the weeds anyplace. So Mr. Durgan purchased this piece of property in this past spring. After purchasing the piece of property, he approached the city administration about the possibility of selling it, realizing that it was involved in the underpass project. At that time, he offered an initial selling price of about $480,000. The administration researched the matter. We worked with our consultants at Dow HKM and some local real estate consultants. We did some we toured the property and did some very, I would say, 30,000 foot review of some real estate records and things like that. And as a part of the back and forth between Mr. Durgan and I expressed to him that I just was unable to recommend that the city purchase the property at this time based on first the uncertainty of the timing of the project as well as the offer price that he had put on the property. Mr. Durgan, who's a very patient individual, came back. And I did say, though, that I would be willing to recommend that the city offer a first right of refusal kind of agreement where if Mr. Durgan found a bidder, then we could at least have the right to purchase it first if we deemed that that was important. Mr. Durgan indicated that probably was not going to work because his plan would be to sell the lots, to divide it up and sell in individual lots. And so That would occur way too quick to be of any value to the city or to him. We then had further conversation, at which point Mr. Durgan fairly expressed that there had to be a price point at which the city could not or would not walk away from this purchase. And at that point offered a purchase price of $265,000 and asked me to go back and reinvestigate. And so I did that. I went back and had further conversations with Dow HKM and some of our other resources and looked at some other information. And again, though, came back to Mr. Durgan and said, I think that's a very a worthwhile move that you made on price. However, given the first two considerations that I mentioned about the timing of the project and the offer price, I just don't think I'm still not in a spot where the administration is comfortable making a recommendation that the property be purchased. One of the things that bears pretty heavily on that decision would obviously be if the city commission has guidance or direction that it would like to give with regard to any level of urgency to the administration or further negotiations, or how you would like to see that. In fairness to Mr. Durgan, he needs a decision from the city so that he can move forward one way or the other with his property, either selling it to us or the development of the property for his purposes. So that being said, once we reach that point, Mr. Durgan and I agreed that the moment was probably right for him to approach the city commission and have a conversation and let the city commission provide any additional direction to both of us that get approved. Is that a fair description, Dan? All right, good.
All right, commission discussion. Go ahead, Commissioner Stern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question, I think the answer is obvious, but go through it with me anyway, just briefly. So let's say we decline Mr. Durgan's offer and then he sells the lots, they get developed, and then we move forward on the underpass. Then at that point, we would be required, so what would happen then is the question, and the answer is, I guess is the following answer true, we would be required to buy it at elevated prices.
Potentially, yes. So what would happen is there's a process that we would go through to acquire the property. And that process could start with negotiations with the single or combined property owners. And there is a way that they get comparable prices and they get appraisals, and there's a weighting and an averaging type of thing. And there's a negotiation. If that doesn't work, then there are legal processes that you go through, and again, you have multiple appraisals, and there's a legal decision that comes and decides what the value of the property. But certainly, I think it's fair to say, for Mr. Durgan's purposes, that if the properties are sold and developed, the potential cost of acquiring them at a later date will be greater, more than likely, than even the purchase price that he is offering at this time.
Right. How many lots are there?
There's 8 lots.
And do you have any plans on how you're gonna divide it up? Or you'll just open them all up for purchase?
Right. I have a business right now that would like the whole property. So I'm trying with what's best if you guys choose not to purchase it.
Right.
In that situation, they would stay on property. Otherwise, it's zoned neighborhood commercial. So we would probably want to build commercial condos. Plan B would be to build a commercial condo building where we could sell and or lease individual units in that condo. I think 6 is a practical number of small businesses. 7, maybe 8. You could do 8 with that because there's 8 lots already divided there.
So Jim, that's neighborhood commercial? Okay. One of the few islands.
Yeah, there's not a lot of commercial property servicing the north side.
One of the few islands of neighborhood commercial property.
Correct.
Okay, I understand that. The urgency on, right, so let me back up. I 100% agree with the city manager in this case that given the uncertainty of the timeline of getting the underpass, just can't justify spending this kind of money on that property at this point. And so my primary inclination is to not move forward on your offer, as generous as it is. It just doesn't seem responsible for the city government to do so at this time. However, it's a very small however. It doesn't really change the fundamental premise. Urgency on the project, given where we're at, I don't think it would be reasonable to wait for the next Tiger Grant application to move forward, and it would be nice within the next 6 to 8 months to move forward with some sort of levy, is that the right word, with the communities to see what sort of financial burden the community would wish to bear for the underpass. In terms of a vote, what we're talking about is going to the voters to ask the voters to raise their property taxes to help pay for the underpass. And we could set it up in a graded fashion, so, you know, vote yes on $10 and vote yes on $20, and so you get to some threshold. I don't think the community would be willing to pay for the entire project. So what do we decide? That's $100 or $75 a parcel per year. Anyway, so it would be nice to move forward with a levy to the voters on the project before the next grant cycle comes through. But even if that levy passes, I don't think that money will be there immediately, right? It'll have to collect for a little while. Is that right?
That's correct. Depending on what the amount of the levy is, how you're going to collect it, how much it's intended to raise. So when we raised when the voters approved the 650,000, that was over a 5-year period.
So even if the community shouldered a large part of the financial burden, we still wouldn't be in a position to move on the project right away. And so because of the uncertainty of the timing and the long time frame in front of us, I don't think it's responsible for the city at this point to purchase that. So I'm just one commissioner and I only have one vote, but that's how I feel on this. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Just one last second. So did that at least give you a big idea on time frame, urgency, at least from this one commissioner, on moving forward on the project?
I think it was very clear from the one commissioner.
Great. And then, all right, so thank you for coming. And with that, I
Question, has an actual appraisal been done on the property? So to give us a more concrete selling price that would be recommended, or no?
it would have been one, I'm not sure the last date it's been appraised. It wasn't when I purchased it, but I know it would have been because I purchased it as a foreclosed property. So the bank must have had an appraisal. Yes.
Do you know anything on?
We did not undertake an appraisal. This time we haven't done that simply because of the cost, given the fact that we wasn't in a position to recommend going forward or hadn't been directed by the city commission to complete further negotiations.
Mr. Chair,
I could just, one thing I forgot to mention earlier, because it's in the last paragraph of this memorandum. I just reminded the city commission in the last paragraph that if you go all the way back to our original memorandum of understanding with the State Department of Transportation, that memorandum outlines the fact that it's the city's responsibility to purchase all right-of-way that's necessary for this project. And so when we had this first conversation with Mr. Durgan at a city commission meeting, Commissioner Hoagland asked about the funding sources that we might have to purchase the property now, should the city commission be interested in doing that. Just in quick reference, the two funding sources that would be proposed by the city administration, if the commission wanted to go forward, would be to come from the railroad underpass mill levy account, which currently has a balance of $190,000, and then the transportation impact fees, because this would be an expansion project in the transportation system. And it also has, oddly enough, a current balance of $190,000. So if the city commission were inclined, I would think that we could mix the funding from those two sources if the city commission were. And I think, just one more point of clarification, that Mr. Durgan has indicated that while 265 is his current offer, he's also open to further negotiations if that's something that the city commission wants to do. Is that a fair assessment?
We should go up.
That's not usually how I negotiate, but,
Yeah.
so I mean, I just want to be clear about all of those particular things. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further commission discussion?
I feel like we do need to think about this as a future important issue, because we're going to have to buy the property or deal with the property in general. I feel like it feels rushed, even though we have met with you a couple times, which I appreciate. But I feel we're rushing a bit into a decision, which is just a huge decision, and this is a small part of it. And yet I don't want to negate that it's not important as well.
I think your asking price is reasonable. You know, I think what we have available is not quite that amount. I think my reservation is we don't have any funding for the underpass at this time. We're not sure when we're going to get that funding, or how or what source we're going to get that funding. So what happens is that it comes next year, and we decided to do that right now with you. That would have been we would have made a wise decision. If we buy it now and it doesn't happen for 5 years, we'll hold on to the property. We could always let it appreciate and sell it later if we had to. I'm sure that's something the city could do. So, you know, not knowing the future of this project and when it's going to happen, you know, it makes it a little tentative to be firm about some type of direction on this. I know you have to move forward. You can't just be waiting for some type of nebulous answer from us. You need to, make good on your investment. I understand that. At the same time, if the city did purchase it at an agreed upon cost somewhere between what we were asking and what you're asking at this point, I don't know how much of a gamble it would be for us to do that and sit on the property and have it appraised for several years to find out what this project is going to do. And for some reason, we reach a statute of limitations in regards to the timing of this project, the funds of the mill levy, and what the state requires us to do in that circumstance. We'll still have that property that then the city could sell and probably either break even or gain on that. But sounds like I'm trying to convince myself to buy the property. So if we bought it now for an agreed upon price and held on to it until we build, seeing that you're wanting to develop it, we would save the city money because we would buy it at today's price and not at the price in the future, which doesn't seem like prices are going down, but they do periodically. Plus, if we did buy it and we didn't do the project, the city could resell the property, resell it as 8 separate parcels, and probably not be any worse for the wear. So I guess my recommendation would be why don't we find a negotiating spot that works for both parties and see if that works at this time. Because it is land, it is property, it is a very unique property and in a commercial setting. And the city's gonna need that property if we build the underpass, and it can release that property if we do not build the underpass. So, what, if the commission thought that buying this property was worthwhile, given the amount of funds that we have for this project, and the seller is asking 265, and the city was in the suggestion area of 200,000, what would you feel, given the current circumstances of unknowns and knowns, would be an appropriate negotiating price? Mr. Freeman.
Is that building usable?
Yeah, maybe Mr. Neeson want to address that. You know how you use it more than me.
So it is, the upstairs is, I would say, B+ level finish out office space. Carpets, walls, trims, doors, those types of things. It's got a downstairs basement that's probably a C-level living space. Upper C. C-, meaning that you could live down there. But it is very dark and pretty closed in and in the need of quite a bit of update. My concern about using the building for city purposes is it would require us to retrofit it as a public building with regard to the ADA and different types of standards, which I think would make it cost prohibitive for us to do. The building itself perhaps could be leased to somebody else. I'm not sure if we would then still incur all of the same public amenity responsibilities. I have to do some more research on that. But the building itself is in pretty good shape to the eye. Now I say that I'm not a structural engineer. We didn't have a structural engineer take a look at it. So, but it's been up there for a long time. I don't know. I'd say 2 years. No, off and on. Yeah.
I drive by that building every year, every day.
Yeah, I go by that building.
And seems like there's been renters in it within the last year
Yes, yeah, there was a gentleman living there
for his family.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should say on the far end, right? On the far end, there's a bay, a garage bay with a garage door and like a workshop type of area upstairs as well. Right. So, Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
I think Mel had the
Oh,
floor.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, no. Okay. I was going to say, Mr. Chair, given the comments from the City Commission, head shakes and that type of thing, does the commission want us to entertain 2 more weeks of negotiation to see if we can try and reach a price for the next meeting?
Mr. Chair. Yes, Commissioner Stern.
Yeah, I would support the chair's recommendation and also throw in a caveat that this one commissioner is very skeptical, and I would encourage you to work for rock bottom prices. Anything, I don't know, that's what's going to be required for my positive vote, is that it's really a deal for the city given the uncertainty of the time frame. I think the chair has a good recommendation, but I think in this case it's wise to proceed with caution. So yes, absolutely engage in the negotiations, and we'll see where we go.
Mr. Chair. Could we try to get a little more official numbers from maybe appraising it or real estate comparisons, something?
A real estate comparison would be good.
Commissioner, I agree with you. We did some loose real estate comparisons, but nothing like a formal. Thing. I would probably veer that way more than the appraisal, just because of the time and the cost that's required to have that done. We could certainly do some real estate comparisons.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind the commission that we have spent $1 million on this property in environmental studies and engineering specific to this property. all of which are worth nothing if you don't build another pass, and all of which have expiration dates where they will have to spend more money to renew them. So this would be the one thing you would invest in the property where you would retain value and be able to get something out of it. Your time, the engineering, all those things are worth nothing if you build an underpass. So I would be less hesitant to purchase something with real value than to do all the $1 million you've already spent. I think that's,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Durgan, are you open to another 2 weeks of negotiations? Is that fit within your timeframe?
Does that mean 2 weeks of negotiation, then
Come back to the city commission to see if we've got a price that they can agree to?
you come back with a resolution? What do we come back with?
We would come back with, an answer to the city commission where either you and I have come up with, well, we come back with an ultimate price is what we would do. And then the city commission would have to say if that's within or outside of the range of what they're ready to do at this time.
Then we would have to go make a resolution and come back again.
Well, if we give a yay or nay at that point, you're gonna know.
You're gonna know.
You're gonna know, so.
And then we would do a budget amendment to spend the money, but the motion Michael was made with regard to the school nurse tonight. I mean, that was just a separate issue, but if it comes back and the city commission took a motion to approve to purchase the property for X dollars, the resolution is the final step, but it becomes more of a formality. That makes sense?
Yeah, I feel strong it's the best thing for the city to.
And I hesitate to call anything the city commission does a formality. I don't mean that. But
Fair enough. Yeah.
are you open to another 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's the best thing for the city to pursue this a little further before we.
Can the city, rather than spend all cash on it, take a mortgage on it?
Sure we could.
Can we enter into that where you have a payment?
Debt service.
A debt service. Even though I'm not into debt services, it seems like the money would be better spent on something that you could actually finance that has a real value, rather than doing a debt service on a garbage truck that loses value.
Mr. Chair, I don't know of a reason we couldn't do debt service on this particular project if we wanted to. We would certainly have the property in the building as security, and an appraisal would then be required like any other loan, as long as we met borrowing capacity of the appraisal.
Yeah, as long as they looked at your credit report and it was okay, I think you're.
I'm sorry, Mr. Coates.
And Mr. Chair, what I was going to say is I can certainly provide you a memorandum regarding the legality of that and the hoops we would have to jump through in order to accomplish such an arrangement.
Okay. Are there hoops?
There may be, probably.
I would entertain financing the city as well.
I need self-finance.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind having you owe me money for a change. And while we're on the topic, when we negotiate, I will remember a $20 parking ticket that I just paid that I shouldn't have had to pay. So I will play into my negotiations.
$265,000 and $20.
Yeah.
Minus 20 is the starting price.
Yeah.
All right, so, just like Patricia, does that sound acceptable to investigate that, come back with a price? All right, Patricia? Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. I know that we're not easy to deal with.
Sure.
Patricia Gray with 204 East Calendar Street. Has the idea of a land swap with city-owned property ever been entertained? I mean, the city owns quite a bit of land, pretty clear. Has that ever been entertained about swapping this land for some desirable land that the city
That's a
owns?
good idea, but we got some really great sewer land that we'd like to swap out.
Oh, yeah, or carcinogenic polluting land. I'm just saying, that is something that's worth exploring. The other quick question I have is, should the city commission change and decide to do an overpass? Is this piece of property necessary for an overpass as well? Okay. Well, my suggestion is to just take a serious look at land swap. if he would even be open to that.
Do we have any land that's of any commercial value to swap?
Mr. Chair, we own 37% of this building in the parking lot.
Do we?
We do. I'm certain we have an inventory, Mr. Chair. I know we do have a public lands inventory. And
That's worth looking at. It's a good idea.
we could take a look at that and see if there's anything there in the garage that Mr. Durgan's interested.
Okay. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am. I didn't see, I couldn't, I only saw your hand. Sorry, I apologize.
My name's Barb Britt. I live at 919 West Concord. And listening to what Mr. Bennett had to say, I agree with, on this purchase pretty much. I've owned property my family has in Park County for years. It doesn't usually go down. It goes up. It sounds like the price is within a reasonable amount and that you could turn around and sell it. When I moved back to Livingston, I think it was 2004, after being gone for a few years, I bought a lot out in that same area that I was going to build a house on. And I bought it for $27,000 and a couple years later sold it for 60-some thousand. And one of the better deals I've made in my life. And I think that purchasing this property would probably be a real smart move. It's not going to go down, and you should probably no doubt sell it for what you're going to have invested.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Warren, do you got any thoughts on this? You're an investor.
No, sir.
No? Okay.
Actually, I do.
Couldn't resist, could you?
I think it sounds like a good idea to do it.
Do you?
Yes. Because of what was just said.
Yeah, if it gets
And the money
developed,
is
it's gonna be a lot
available.
more expensive. Yeah, you're right. If it gets developed, it's gonna be a lot more expensive.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Mr. Bennett, I just have one question.
Yes, sir.
There. Shakekeeper, 13% Drive. I had coffee with a friend, and he said, well, the underpass isn't the only item on there. Where is it going to start, and where would it, where's the starting point, where's the end point? And he said, I have a feeling that you're going to have to basically take some of the property that's part of the Voyage Ranch in the grand scheme of things. And if you think the 8 lots is something, wait till you start talking to a ranch there and say, you know what, we're going to need part of this there. So I just wanted to that little bit of conversation over coffee. I just wanted to have that sort of be part of your methodology when you make a decision. Thank you.
A word of caution, you mean?
I don't think the city is aware of where the starting point is and where the end point is. All we've been talking about is what it's going to cost for this, what it's going to cost for that. But as far as the map and how much land is actually going to be required for this on there, that is still an unknown right now. Thank you very much.
30 seconds, can you address that?
Mr. Chair, we do know all of that. I mean, that's been the purpose of the design process. And there is a construction easement that's necessary from the Voyage property. To my memory, the only other piece of easement that's necessary is with the current drainage plan, there's a need to build some different kinds of drainage improvements that Mr. Voyage has been in conversation with us and the Department of Transportation with. So the construction easement is more of a temporary easement while we're in the construction process. And then there is a small permanent easement that's attached to some of the drainage work that would have to go on to make sure, because we have to lower one road and raise the other. And in the process of that, we're changing a little bit of the drainage pattern. So we all of that, if you'd like to look at, that's part of the $1 million design. We know we're all the right of way that we need to be purchased.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you have enough to go on for right now?
I do, Mr. Chair. We will take that as guidance and move forward.
Okay, great. Okay, moving on to action item C, discuss manager's conduct with regard to Livingston Healthcare Facility Project. If I may just kind of start on that, if that's okay. I did have a conversation with Brent Lowe. It's okay if I paraphrase it. If I mess up the conversation, just come up here and correct me if I'm wrong. That, maybe what the city and the healthcare can do is have the city and administration and anyone on from their perspective and the healthcare get together, have a meeting, and have two commissioners at the meeting as well. So it doesn't have to be a fully noticed meeting for the public, which makes it a little more difficult to get together and set times. And if the meeting needs to go over another day or get rescheduled, that makes it difficult for noticing on behalf of the commission. And then work out any differences there may be, come to a positive resolution so that everyone walks away with a clear and resolution as far as how things work out and any financial issues that may come up, we can resolve those as well. Is that fairly accurate? I know that we talked for a little bit, but that's something that the Livingston Healthcare is willing to do?
Yes.
As far as an initial step?
Yes.
Okay. And I talked to the administration as well, and that sounded like it would work out for them. So I wanted to propose that to the commission and see if that was okay with the commission, to take that initial first step, and also for the commission to appoint two people to go to that meeting and report back to the commission on that. And if I may be so bold, I'd like to suggest maybe the chair and the vice chair to be in that meeting, unless you guys have any other recommendations.
I would like to go to that meeting, but I'm happy to go to the meeting as a citizen and not engage in any discussion, and certainly not engage in any, no discussion and decision. And then I also like to make certain that the public and the rest of the commission are aware of when and where that meeting occurs.
Sure.
But if, right, so I'd like to know when and where the meeting is. I'd like to attend, and if you two want to be the official representatives of the commission, I'm
Are we, with that type of configuration, are we violating the public notice laws?
In my opinion, no, as long as Commissioner Stern does not actively participate in the discussion, as long as he's attending as an individual and in his individual capacity, there's no violation of open meetings laws.
Okay.
Because then a quorum would not be present.
Okay. That sounds good. So, why does the administration and Livingston Healthcare set a time and a place that's convenient for all parties, and then, have any of your experts there that you need to provide information so that we can come to a positive resolution in this. And just a second. And make sure that you find good times for Darrell and myself. Of course, Adam to make it to that meeting as well.
We'll certainly do that, Mr. Chair. We can have discussions between our organizations and set a date.
Okay.
I'll just say I can't from morning until 1. I can get to a meeting after 1, generally.
And I think that given Livingston Healthcare's communications earlier this week, and I think it would be accurate, that the length of that meeting is probably at least 2 hours. So does that generally work, Commissioner Holden, or do we need to start that later in the like say 3?
It'd be better later for me.
Started like mid-afternoon, perhaps 3 o'clock, something like that. Okay.
Sounds good.
I guess we
Can we go with that?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So I want to at least start off with that. Is there anything else we want to discuss at this point?
That's the next one.
On this topic.
No,
Is there anything the healthcare wants to bring up at this point?
No, there's not.
Okay. Is there any public comment at this point on this? Yes, sir.
If Mr. Stearns.
Oh, no, please come up to announce your, state your name and address for the record.
That's 35 Outlaw Hill, Livingston. If Mr. Stearns can be allowed to attend that meeting as a public citizen, is the rest of the public going to be allowed to be there also?
Is that a yes or no?
I'm shaking my head, Mr. Chair. I would defer that answer to Mr. Coe.
If we do it that way, then we have to properly notice it so the public gets enough advance notice and they can participate and show up and listen to the discussion. It would operate almost like a
workshop
or a special meeting, but generally a special meeting contemplates a quorum convening, but it would almost take that same.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Right, I think you're right, Eric's. It could be a workshop format, where in the workshop, we always lay out in the notice that we're not gonna take any action
or make any decisions.
Or make any decisions. That's purely for informational purposes. And then we follow all the time requirements for days of notice and all those types of things.
And no minutes or anything would be taken at such a meeting.
No minutes. Is that acceptable to Livingston Healthcare?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes. Is that okay? Okay. My original intent with having two commissioners there was to make sure that we weren't slowing the meeting down and hindering it with any type of additional questions. If we have it in that format, is there public participation as well? Do we have to allow for that?
Well, and
You don't think so?
Generally, we are required, if we issue an agenda for a meeting, we are required to have a place on that agenda for public comment. I think to err on the side of caution, we could have a section at the end of that meeting to entertain public comment, but I don't think that we'd be required to under the law.
Can you find that out before we have that meeting?
Yeah, and I will, before we notice the meeting, I will do some research and I'll send you an email.
Okay, because the intent really is for both parties to really work something out and to get into the details and make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of the different perspectives, and that we can come to some type of amiable resolution in the process. It's not to provide 10 other different perspectives. It's really for Livingston Healthcare and the city of Livingston to work an issue out in a way that works best for both of them. Do you see any problems with that? Is Livingston Healthcare okay?
Yeah.
You're good? Okay. All right.
We'll work together on getting the date and time.
Okay.
That makes it work for everybody, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Are you good?
Is that a yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Tricia?
Patricia Grable, 204 East Calendar. I was disappointed that the emails back and forth were not in the packet. It was my understanding that they belonged in the packet tonight, and I looked online and I couldn't find them. Can the public get access to those emails? It seems like we should be able to. Where could we get that?
Specifically, what emails are you talking?
The emails back and forth between the city manager and the Livingston Healthcare.
Mr. Chair, man. Ms. Grabo, if there's some email that you want, all you have to do is file an open records request, and we're glad to provide anything you need.
What I want is all the emails between the city manager and Livingston Healthcare during the time period of time in question.
All you have to do is come to the office,
It takes 20 days to get it, that'll be.
fill out the form, and we will comply with your request.
But I won't get it in 20 days, and it'll be for this meeting.
I don't know what the 20 days you're talking about is. I'm saying that there's a process that we go through, that we're required to go through for open records request. If you file that request, the city will accomplish that request within the best time frame that we can.
But why is that, why weren't those emails in the packet tonight? Did the
I don't
city
know if
manager
anyone
answer that?
I wasn't told to put anything in the packet for that.
Fill out the open records request and we'll get you the emails.
Okay. And I appreciate very much that the public can participate in that, because it isn't a private club with, you know, another private club. You are us. Appreciate it. We don't have to say anything, oddly enough. But I will do it. But we could make a public comment, yeah, but I think it's really important the public be available to be able to see this process. Thank you.
Should we just move it to having 2 commissioners there for sure, now you can go and James instead of me attending, and then it won't have to be a public notice. Everyone knows about it now, it's on the books. But publicly noticed and having those detailed things like an agenda and things that potentially might come up. Would it be easier for just me to back out of the meeting? And I can communicate as well, you know, to Brandon and Michelle and in other ways too. So I don't know, just to avoid the.
My concern is that it's not a closed meeting. Closing a meeting is trouble, and I don't think this should be a closed meeting. And then, as far as a workshop goes, I don't think we have to entertain public comment. I think it just has to be a meeting where people can observe so they know what's going on. The commission meetings and the committee meetings are where people get to comment. But certainly I do not think there should be a closed meeting.
And I would agree with your last comment that, you know, generally public input and public comment is required before any decisions are made. And if there are no decisions to be made, you're not, like I said, you are not required to entertain public comment, but of course you have the discretion to do so.
Any more comment on this issue? Yes.
Extend.
Warren, before you comment, can we need to vote to extend time past 9:30?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Please extend it. You're up, Warren. It'll be quick. Warren, maybe 310 South 8th Street, Livingston. I would suggest that this is a lot larger topic than just the misunderstanding between the city manager and Livingston Healthcare. And I would suggest that a meeting or so ago, that all came out into the open. Handling it like this makes it look like it's being swept under the rug. I think it's a real bad idea. And I don't think it's a situation just between the 2 parties involved. I think it's much wider than that. And I think that restricting it by the type of meeting that you want to have is really, really it not only has the appearance of sweeping it under the rug, it is sweeping it under the rug. So I would suggest that at the very least, it has to be a public meeting. It has to be announced so that anybody who wants to be there can be there. And I don't think it should be restricted at all. Thank you.
JP for 15 as a side drive, this is Montana. I have one question. Let me get the microphone. I will do it if I tablet my proposal. regarding the item as far as the city manager's contact with the hospital, I have one question I'd like to ask. Is this conduct in the emails that you related, what did it occur after your most recent evaluation of the city manager or before?
I don't know. I'm not sure if I understand.
Well, I really can't disclose my source of information, but there was a flurry of, as Patricia Graybo referenced, email activity with the board of directors and Mr. Meese, and this was back and forth.
Oh, you got it? Okay.
So, Mr. Kiefer, I think I can answer that question.
Okay.
So first up, there were emails that were received from Ms. Becker as a personal citizen to the city commission that arrived on Tuesday afternoon before the meeting, was the last meeting, so the 1st of September.
Okay.
So that's when those issues came about. There was discussion of some of those issues during the evening, and then there were follow-up emails the next day. I believe one of them from Ms. Becker and one from Mr. Lowe. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
Any
Mr.
more
Chair-
comments?
So,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
just to recap, if I understand what we're doing, we're going to create a workshop scenario. We're going to advertise it publicly, and we will provide that information to the public and the city commission. And in the meantime, Mr. Lowe and I will work out a date and a time, preferably starting middle to late afternoon, and allowing for at least 2 to 3 hours of conversation if we need it. Okay. Is that what I'm hearing from the group? Is that agreeable to you, Brent? Yes.
And Warren, I think I owe you an answer for your comments. I don't get you may feel like we're trying to sweep this under the table. What I think we're trying to do is there are some very specific issues in the development of the hospital project that the hospital wants to resolve with the city. And those issues really aren't any broader than that. If there are some professional issues that they want to bring up as well, there's monetary and professional issues. Those are the 2 issues. And no one's trying to sweep that under the table. We're trying to resolve
It's
them.
beyond that. It's well beyond that. It's the actions of the city manager. It's the behavior of the city manager. It's not how much is it going to cost for a lift pump.
Mr. Chair.
You can comment if you like.
Mr. Chair, I'm only going to comment on the fact that there are opinions both ways. And I've been very clear with the city commission in the letter that I gave them tonight, and I've been very clear with the city commission in the letter that I provided them tonight between the administration and LHC that came out in February. So I'm not sitting up here asking for a closed session or a non-public meeting or anything like that. I and my administration have absolutely nothing to hide. I don't need that. And I appreciate your comments. Evidently you think I do, but I don't. I'm very straightforward about what's happened with the way I've handled that project and the way our administration's handled that project. I'm very proud of it. So it's not really bigger than that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any more comments? Okay. So we are at city manager comments. Do you have any?
Mr. Chair, just a couple things I want to add. First off, I handed out a letter tonight. I want to just make this available to the city commission so that you're aware of what's getting ready to happen. What you have is a packet that we're going to be providing to the property owners to be affected by the next CIP project, especially as it regards the vaults and what options are open to them, what the timeframes are. You'll see all that information in there. And so this will be part of our scoping project to make sure that the new engineering firm is following up on all of these details post haste with the property owners that have faults. Correct, Shannon?
Exactly.
But I just wanted to make you all aware of this so you have copies. So if you begin to get questions, you can refer to this. And obviously, if there's any detailed, specific questions, certainly forward them to the administration. We'll be glad to comment. Item number 1, Mr. Chair. The only, so I did make comment in here again, just to repeat that the city is very appreciative of the 2 portable hand washing stations that were purchased by Park County Health Department and through the grant process, I believe, we provided to the city. So we appreciate that. They've already been received, and we're looking for ways to implement that in special events as they occur and make those available for that purpose. The only other comment that I would make tonight, Mr. Chair, is for the city commission to be aware that I will be out of the office on business from the 25th of September to the 30th of September. I'll be attending the International City Managers Conference. This is a special conference for me because I will receive my 25th year service award as a city manager. And it's in Seattle this year, which is pretty close and keeps the expenses down quite a bit. So, but in that time period, should you need me, obviously I'm available by phone or email. So that's all I have.
Great, very much. Mr. Friedman.
Yes, I want to make a special comment about the tennis courts. That's my route every day with my Snickers, and I see that fence up and a beautiful blacktop. It's very special. So, yeah, and that's going to be ready this fall, ready for next spring. So that's a fantastic job. To make the community aware, I'm on the tree board committee, and Mike Gomez is the head of that committee. We are going to the City of Livingston and Montana Department of Natural Resources and the Urban Community Forestry Program, Wyoming State Forestry Division, the U.S. Forest Service, Montana Urban and Community Forest Association, and other partners are organizing the 6th Northern Rockers Tree School. The conference will be held September 30th through October 2nd, 2015 in Livingston, Montana. This is going to bring 175 people to our beautiful city. It's going to be held at the Shane Center, and it's arborists, tree workers, foresters, all the people in the industry. And it's quite a feather in our cap to have this. And we've been working real hard getting sponsors. It's coming together very well. So it's quite an honor we got the award last year for Tree City Award, and we're going to try and capitalize on that. So this is pretty important. It's also going to be good training for people in public works. It's a win-win situation. So we're looking forward to it. We're moving in the right direction, I think, right now. So it's exciting. I yield.
Thank you. So we received this letter from, did you all receive the letter about the bears in town from Mr. Stevens? And he went through a great deal of effort to document the issues of bears in town and some potential solutions, whether or not potential solutions, namely bear-proof garbage cans in public areas like Sac Park and stuff, Sacagawea Park, whether or not that is adequate and whether or not we can even afford it remains to be seen. But because he put so much effort into this, and because he points out the liability, does MMIA cover a bear mauling in town? There's a liability issue with that as well if someone could show negligence. So it's at least worth a discussion. And if there is no liability or the partial solutions recommended aren't adequate, then maybe we don't go forward. But I think we should at least deserve I think at least Mr. Stevens deserves the discussion.
Mr. Chair? Yeah. Just to so that you know, Public Works has already started a project of researching all of those issues, and we plan a response Mr. Stevens in writing. We'll also provide a copy of that to the city commission, trying to research what the costs are and feasibility of where they would go.
You let Mr. Stevens know that's been going on. We will. Then I don't think we have to put that on the agenda. That is fine. Thanks for being in touch with us. I'm moving forward on that. Another one, this is a little esoteric, but given the Syrian and Iraqi refugee problem in the Middle East and what the European Union is doing to try to attempt to absorb some of those refugees, I wonder if it's not time for us to step up and offer at least what little we can do. There is currently no U.S. federal program to accept any of these Syrian refugees, but it's obviously a very large crisis. And what very little we could do on this, and I'm not saying that we should or we will, but what we could is offer to the federal government, if they would set up such a program, that we could take a small number of refugees into our community. I suppose if enough communities did that, the federal government might take action. They might take action on their own, and if they did, we would be on record for that. That's also at least worth the consideration. Maybe some feel that our community cannot support them. I know many feel that we can. And so I'm up here representing my constituents, and I'm up here representing myself as a commissioner, and I'm representing my family, asking to put that discussion item on the agenda. There's certainly no federal program that will be implemented immediately or very quickly, so we have time to talk about it. But I certainly would like to talk about that possibility at the next commission meeting, if possible. Is there another commissioner that would be willing to put that on the agenda? Great. So that would just be a discussion of Livingston potentially. Let me be clear. We're not going to offer haven to Syrian refugees on our own. Livingston would work through any federal program with federal requirements and constraints, a program that does not yet exist. But this would be one small statement from Livingston that we'd be willing to help, and it would go off to the federal government. So, I don't know how you want to phrase it on the agenda, but that's the intent. The last item I have is for Warren. Warren, I absolutely heard what you said, and believe me when I say this is not sweeping it under the rug. I agree with you that there are some big issues. I personally am disappointed with the city manager's conduct on this issue, and I will attend specifically to do due diligence, even if not to participate, but to make certain to at least listen to the proceedings. It won't be swept under the rug, and we will do due diligence. So thank you for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wolfman.
Two things. One is putting on the agenda maybe in 2 meetings. I'm sure we're filling up. But the discussion of calendar and traffic safety on calendar, which we talked about a little bit before. I'd like to address it. Do I get a second? I guess I should.
Give a second.
So yeah, maybe 2 meetings. I think it. And the second thing is, we as a commission, as the bosses of the city manager, had previously come up with a plan and our evaluations to do it biannually, and that is coming up in October. The second.
Do we have a date for that?
When we planned it, it was the 13th. But at this state or time, we should all check into that and see if that date still works. So the 13th is a Tuesday, and I think we have it at 6.
That works for me. Good. So are we going to schedule that then?
So this is Tuesday between the 2 meetings.
Yep.
Fine with me. That work for you now?
What day are we looking at?
It's October 13th. It's Tuesday between the two meetings in October.
You said 6-ish. And is that story?
Yeah, I'm gonna get my head there down.
All right.
That's all.
One thing I wanted to mention was just to remind the commission that we don't, by state law, we don't give direction to any employee other than our own employee. And we have conversations with them. We want to make sure that it isn't really about city business or anything of that nature. So there's some things going on. So just as a reminder that that's our guidelines by city law. All right, public comment.
Ryan Mavardi, 12 River Drive. I have a list of things to go over with you. I'll try to make them brief. First one is a question. When the facade, thank you for passing the facade and energy program. It was very important to me. Very hard decision to step off the board. And so thank you tonight. It meant a lot to me that you guys passed that. And what will the next steps be? Do we have to do 2 resolutions, 1 or 2 readings? One, so that's done. The URA facade program energy is done. Okay, when are the applications going to be available and where?
Chair. So I met with Ms. Pettit last week, and I believe that is a topic that she's taking up with the board at her very next meeting, which I think is tomorrow morning. Is that correct? That's the topic on there as to how they also have on their continuing conversation about how they're going to staff the board and the RFP process, which plays into the application process as well.
Okay. Okay, then the next things I want to say with a caveat, I am not personally attacking anyone. I'm not talking about anyone as a soccer dad, as a soccer mom. I'm strictly talking about their jobs. And so if we could keep this separate, I would greatly appreciate it. And please realize I'm not personally attacking anyone. In June of 2014, I have emails going back and forth from the city finance officer and myself about the URA charging 6% versus 4% on the B Street owners. I have emailed and discussed. I was told by the administration last June to ask no more questions and they would go through him. Then I asked, when would those refunds take place? It's not the city's money. We were overcharging. It was past 4%. When are we getting a refund? He replied to me, September. I asked why, and he said, that's the way I choose to do it. It's September. Have those refund checks been mailed out?
I'm lost. I don't know what you're talking about.
The URA charges for the sidewalk replacement costs. We pay for 50%. We finance the other 50% over 5 years on their taxes at a rate of 4%. The city was charging 6%. I caught this in some financials. Inform the city finance. In June of 2014, I have those emails if you'd like them. And for over a year, I was told, in June of 2014, Ms. Hogue emailed me back and said it would be taken care of. I repeatedly requested at the URA meetings and more, where Mr. Meese then told me in June of 2015 or May of 2015, it's in the minutes, that he would take care of it and to not question the city finances anymore. And any question about finances was to go through him. So then I asked Mr. Meese, when are the refund checks being cut? It's been over a year. This is not the city's money. He told me September. I asked why. He said that's the way we're going to do it. It's September, and I'm wondering if the checks got mailed out.
So, Mr. Chair, just to start with, I disagree with Ms. Rivard's characterization of how those conversations went outside the emails. I would also point out, not meaning to offend anybody, that the reason that I restricted Ms. Rivard's access to the finance department was because of some treatment that she afforded Ms. Hogue at a URA meeting, which was very unprofessional and which reduced her to tears and would send her home early. And so that was the reason that I took that step. With regard to your question with the refunds, I will find out if we've cut those checks. I'm not acutely aware right now. Part of that had to do with refunding. The refund was accomplished, if I remember right, it was going to be accomplished through a reduction in the assessments on property taxes. And so I'll have to go back and check how that happened last year and how that happened this year. But I'll be glad to provide you that information.
Okay, and I would disagree with the comment about Ms. Hope. Why he got upset, Mr. Beast, is because I simply asked a question about the financial statements. And I said, please don't take this personally. They're in paragraph form and they don't make sense. They don't add up. Can you please clarify? She started crying and asked if everyone else felt that way. We all said, no, we don't. This is not about you. It's a question on the financial reports. The financial reports come out in paragraph form with pictures. And I said, is there simply any way that we can get line items? That's it. I'll show you every email. We can public request it. I can give you everything between Ms. Hogue and I. I am very nice to her. And so if someone took it personally that I asked questions about the budget and things that are off, I mean, there are, to be totally honest, I hope we do, there are items in there that came out of the URA funds that were never voted on. There are items to a board member and to a city, or to a resident in the city. They were never voted on. How does that happen with city funds? I don't know. I've asked and I've asked. I don't know. There was whatever the funds went towards, I'm not saying it was a bad thing, but we never voted on them. It never occurred. The other things about the city finances is.
Ryan,
yes.
Can I just ask something on that?
Sure.
If there's funds that you're responsible for that you didn't approve and the city commission doesn't approve, I'd like to know about it.
If you go.
Can we just get that on the agenda to discuss?
Absolutely.
Okay. Can we get a second? Ready?
Okay.
All right, the other thing is, one last thing for clarification. Sorry, after 9:30, I get a little slow. What, you mentioned something about soccer. What did that have to do with soccer?
I was just saying, please don't take it personally. Like I dig everyone as a human being. And so I knew that this would come up about Ms. Hogue because it has nothing to do with her personally. And that I think that this gets confused. I was just questioning the finance reports. I wasn't questioning her job or her or anything. I just want to keep it separate. I mean, if we're looking at our job specifically, has nothing to do with our personal lives. Like with Ms. Hogue crying, I just was asking a question.
So we're not talking about, it had nothing to do with soccer.
No, I'm just saying in general, or baseball dad, or grandparents.
Got it.
That's all I'm saying. Okay. And then as far as, I think I found the school district some more funds. The URA does pay for 50% of the sidewalks, and they did do some sidewalks down there. And so I will be calling Dr. Moore and pointing out that the URA funds were set aside specifically for that. And then the other thing is I went down to get from the sanitarian a water sampling kit. The reason that is because I know that the tennis association was here, and I now have a relationship with them from helping them with the URA grant. And I said, what else do we need? What else do we need in the park? We need a water fountain. I thought that was a great idea. So I called the city, see if they could get a bid, worked great with Public Works, and then all of a sudden it stopped. What happened to that? What happened? So it was determined that the first, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the first potable water was put into the park recently. You can see the trench. It comes right by my house, like on River Drive and the park. I don't know what that street is. And there's a trench there now, and there's some potable water and the drinking fountain near the pavilions. Well, guess what? That Lion's Head that all of our kids drink out of, including my kids, what I understand from the administration, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's not potable water. The water is shut off, so I can't test it, and I also need the signature of the city. So I am asking that the city commission turn back on that water or test it in the spring, and have we tested it, and is it not potable water? These are the things that I think are important as a community if our children are drinking out of a drinking fountain. So my question is it potable water?
I don't know.
Shannon, you were the one who told me, is it potable water?
I don't remember that conversation.
Are you?
We have a water main that goes to the bathrooms.
Uh-huh.
I
So
don't
is
know-
the Lion Head's
I
potable
don't
water?
know what the water system in the side park is, but I know there's not a city water main.
Are you telling me that the director of public works does not know what the water system in the park is?
Okay, hold on,
there's-
hold on.
I'm sorry, I'll direct it. Are you telling me that the director of the public works does not know what the water system in our park is?
Well, what we can do is we can have this as an issue that we can bring up at a meeting, discuss, or would you get us an answer?
Yes, sir.
Get us an answer between meetings and just email everyone so that we know what's going on.
And we'll make all of that information available in the next pack.
That'd be great. And then the last thing is I think that this issue with the city manager and the hospital and the volunteers is a really large issue. You've heard from multiple volunteers that are unable to work with the city. Have you guys talked about the climbing boulder? Have you talked about the bike park? Have you talked about the skate park? All those volunteers, where are they now? They do not volunteer. I will not volunteer for the city as long as we have the current administration. I will help the skate park out and I will help some of these projects get through, but I think you really need to look at, the commission said that last meeting that you would not vote no again and that this is going to be taken care of. Has there been issues since the last meeting? We have a whole new issue with the Livingston healthcare came out. We have multiple issues with the URA, with volunteers, and I just really ask you to think about that when we go up for his next in October for the city managers, what you're going to do and review him. I really ask you to review him and look at the whole picture. We talk about good versus bad, and he's done more good than bad. Well, I don't know any other CEO that gets to make so many more mistakes. So the good outweighs the bad. How many times do we get to do that? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And so for the benefit of the city, I'm asking you to really think about Mr. Meese as our manager. And then the other thing that I'm going to ask is the last meeting, there was rules set down in place, and it was very specific that we weren't going to intimidate anyone, we weren't going to lecture anyone, we weren't going to personally go after someone, and yet the chairperson allowed it multiple times when it was against two of our commissioners. Now, the second it was against Mr. Meese, or it was shut down. I was insulted many times by the chairperson, asking where the pillars of the community were. Just tonight, asking who voted, that's no one's business. Where I vote or if I vote, that is my choice. And that's inappropriate, I believe, for the chairperson to sit up here and call out the city constantly and the residents. And so I ask, when you guys choose your chairperson next time, you think really hard on who can run an effective meeting, who can keep comments online, and him yelling at other commissioners during the last meeting was uncalled for too. So I ask that you all really think about who you choose for your chairperson. I think Mr. Bennett makes a great commissioner. I just think it would be better served for someone else to be the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any more public comment?
Jay Keeper, 13 Riverside Drive. Regarding the funding issue for the nurses in the schools. I brought this up when there was talk about when the arborist, Mr. Garvey, I believe, was the arborist that was here. And I thought, why doesn't this city ever think about a crowdfunding effort to, this is our need, and let the people across the nation and the world see what our needs are, and let it go into a fund that could help pay for this. I really think, I really do mean that. Don't think outside the box, pretend there is no box. I think sometimes as a city, as a corporation or a government or a committee, we get boxed in and we don't let our thoughts flow freely. The next thing on there, I've been online with some people, and we're talking about the lack of affordable housing in Livingston. And I have to thank the code enforcement people on there and the city attorney for directing me on there as far as I went back to an ordinance that was passed in 2003 on December 15th. There, Vicki Blakeman was the chairperson at the time, where it created the TIP district in the urban renewal program on there. And part of the verbiage that I guess had to be incorporated was the word blight. And the next day, a friend came by and said, "Hey Jay, I want you to go for a ride with me." And we went up on the corner of Montana and D, and I saw a front yard with 5 automobile trucks in their front lawn there, and the next door neighbor had about the equal amount there. And I chatted there with Eric, and I said, "Well, I see the word blight." And I said, it's sort of like pornography on there. I don't know the definition, but I know when I see it. And I saw several examples of it. And then Eric told me, he said, "Well, we do have an urban decay ordinance," which I wasn't aware of. And I'm just curious on there, have these ordinances ever been enforced? Because to me on there, going in the Northern Lights division section of town and up on the hill, there it obviously doesn't get much scrutiny by the part of the city on there. And I'm sort of wondering about us, the city commission, passing ordinances and resolutions. It's sort of like keep your kid happy this week resolution on there, but it doesn't have any teeth. And I really want to have resolutions. I want to have ordinances passed that have teeth, that that the people that are in code or the city police can issue tickets for, to sort of keep our city clean. And then I want to address the main hotel there and the guest house. And to me, these look like possible ventures that the city could interact with to sort of create housing, do something with these structures. I don't know who the owner of the main hotel is. I don't know what kind of contact, if the city attorney's been in contact with the owners there. If we're starting to find out what is what is your game plan as far as rehabbing the unit, the hotel. There, can anybody address my questions?
Well, we haven't really addressed any of those questions as far as the main hotel. The guest house has been looked at by a number of different individuals. The city administration probably know more about the guest house. The main hotel is owned by someone out of state. And as far as I know, it costs a lot of money to repair. I don't know if they have the money.
Okay, so let me get this straight. The main hotel is owned by somebody out of state, but we do have codes, don't we, there?
So Jay, let me try that. So a couple of things. The reason that the main hotel has nobody in it right now is an action of code enforcement. Primarily fire code enforcement as a life safety issue. So there are some very stringent things that have to be done before that building can be rehabilitated or occupied. It's in the suspended state that it is right now because of code enforcement, fire code enforcement. It is owned by a private individual who's out of state. And it is up to that individual to make decisions regarding their personal investments and whether they want to make the expenditures necessary with regard both to the fire code violations as well as the sanitary code violations, and sewer lines and all that. That is that property owner's decision. As long as they own the property and they keep the taxes current, it's really their decision as to what happens going forward with the property. With regard to the guest house, it's also privately owned. At this time, I'm not aware of any code violations inside the building. Work was ceased by the state of Montana because of some environmental violations that have since been rectified. The city has facilitated at least 3 different investors groups, mix of both public and private, for the possibility of doing something different with that facility. In fact, I know there's been efforts since the last one of those that, again, that's a private ownership type of situation. As long as they keep their taxes current, it's really up to them what happens with their structure.
Let me get this straight. You're not saying that as long as you keep paying your property taxes, that you don't have to address code violations that the city has notified you of?
No, that's not what I said at all. I said right now, I'm not aware of any code violations that the guest house has that would require further action by the city of Livingston. It's a privately owned structure. Their taxes are current. We don't have anything to do with what happens to that property. That's a private property decision, just like what's going on with the main hotel.
Okay, well, the main hotel does have code violations.
That's what I said. It is in the condition that it is in. It is in a suspended state and non-occupied because the city enforced code violations, primarily fire code violations, and we enforce sanitary code violations with their requirements to hook to the sanitary sewer system. That's why nobody can be habitating it at the time.
Okay, so because of code violations, nobody can be habitating it. Okay, on there. Okay, that's fine on there. But isn't there something in either a state law that Eric could use or an ordinance that would basically say, okay, these are your violations on there. You have X amount of days to step up to the plate on there and address this, or we will take this to court. Am I making things too simplistic on there? It seems to me like it's pretty open and shut. If you're cited for a violation on there and you don't address the violation on there, then the city administration should take the next step on there and try to enforce the laws that are available to them.
So, and I apologize, but let me try this again. We have done that. So let me give you an example. One of the violations that I remember had to do with the boiler in the basement, correct, Chief? So the boiler was disconnected and removed.
It's in the building, but
it was disconnected from the system, so it's no longer an active safety threat. But there are certain things that would have to happen before that boiler could be reconnected and the building be rehabilitated. The sanitary sewer system. We shut off the connection to the sanitary system, and there are certain things that have to happen to their infrastructure before we would allow them to reconnect. In that type of a structure, connection to a sanitary sewer is going to be a requirement for them rehabilitating the building. So where there's been code enforcement that we could or should have done, we've done it. The next step is now for the owner to decide if they want to make further investments, how they want to make further investments. Do they want to sell the building? That's on them. But at this point, the building is stable and it's not a threat to public health and safety. And beyond that, it's really in the private property owner's hands as to what their next step is.
Well, I guess looking at the main hotel on there, I may not have the definition of it, but I certainly know it when I see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay. Yes, Patricia.
Patricia Graybo, 204 East Calendar Street, Livingston. I want to make one comment, by the way, on the main hotel. I have pictures of when the city went in and put the new water and sewer line in. And in fact, my understanding is that the water and sewer line from the main hotel runs under Kenyon Noble building and hooks up to the city from there. At the time that we put in those new water and sewer lines, we are required to say to the building owners, whose name is Aldrich, who lives in Billings, that offer the possibility of putting new water and sewer lines from the new ones we put on the street to the building. Mr. Aldrich said he was never contacted. He was never informed that that was a possibility for his water and sewer lines. And the main hotel had not one notice that they could get, that they should, in fact, put a new water and sewer line from the water sewer lines that the city was putting in. And that the city was remiss in this. Then when the other thing that happens with the city water sewer line, and this has not been dealt with by this city, is that we are running 90 PSIs on our water that comes through our water and sewer lines. And the legal limit is, I believe, 60. And in fact, what we had to do in our building was put in a $3,000 piece of equipment that allowed us to reduce the water pressure coming into our building from the public lines, because it was doing damage to our interior system. Now, the main hotel had the same thing. It's no wonder their water and sewer line from the new water and sewer line blew when it did. Not only that, but you have to look as seriously at what's going to happen with Kenyon Noble building as well. When the city puts in new water and sewer lines, they're obligated to say to building owners, here, a good idea is to put a new line from your building into our new water and sewer line. It did not happen on the case of the main hotel. The other thing that, in a hopeful note, is I had a wonderful, and I'm exploring this myself, wonderful homeless man who, smart as a whip, who came to see me. He felt that it'd be great to do a Habitat for Humanity construction in that hotel, get a hold of the building, turn it into individually owned apartments for people who are now homeless as a part of a Habitat for Humanity project. There are projects out there in which we can accommodate and help this person rather than just let it sit there. And we're creative enough and we're smart enough to do things like this for our community. Also, the guest house is in process of being seriously looked at in terms of getting it back up and running. I want to say one more time, I want to support what Warren said and what was said this evening about the performance of the city manager. It is so difficult to move ahead as a community and where we need to go. We will continue this process. We will continue to close down things like a main hotel because we are not smart enough to do the things we should do as a city to move on. I was just in Gardner, and this is a proposal I'm going to give to you. The community pulled together. They got to work on the city streets. If you've been to Gardner lately, the $10 million grant they just pulled together for the bicentennial of the national parks in this country, and this city is doing nothing. And we are the original entrance to Yellowstone National Park, not Gardner. Gardner was not even in existence at that time. And if we have enough initiative, if we're able to allow to even just move forward, we can still pull together the infrastructure for being on the map for the celebration, the centennial celebration of the national parks. We must not be held back anymore. It is just time. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I clarify something real quick? I just want to be clear. The city did not close down the main hotel. So let me just be real clear about the chronology of events here. I have no clue when that sewer line was put under Kenyon Noble. But it's been decades.
No.
since-
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, it has.
Yes, it
It's been,
I
Chair,
think you
Chair,
Yes, the city manager
Uh,
has the floor.
it's been decades since that sewer line was put under that building. And when the main hotel encountered its difficulties, it wasn't a water line blowout. It was a cave-in of the sewer line that goes under the Kenyon Noble building. The city has made several alternatives, made the property owner aware of several alternatives for reconnection and reconstruction. The property owner is not a Mr. Aldridge out of Billings. It's another individual that we've been in contact with.
That's a
Obviously, during that
misunderstanding.
time and since that, excuse me?
That's a misunderstanding. This,
Yeah,
it
so-
runs
so I'm
under,
sorry, I'm sorry,
Mr.
I'm sorry,
Aldrich owns a
Mr.
Kenyon
Graybill.
Noble.
I'm still talking.
Tricia?
We did not close that building because of anything we did. We closed that building because it became a public health hazard. We then, at the expense of the city taxpayers, moved everybody out, provided secondary housing, made sure that their health and welfare was taken care of, secured the building, enforced the codes, protected our community, and now we await a decision from a private property owner about what they want to do with their building and their infrastructure. We had nothing to do with closing that building or with this administration, and I suspect the administration 10 years prior to mine, had nothing to do with putting a water line under Kenyon Noble. That was there long ago, and that's the reason that sewer line caved in, because it's an old sewer line that couldn't no longer handle the stress of what was going on. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, the city manager misunderstood what I just said. The city put in new water and sewer lines to that part, to right by in front of Kenyon Noble. When the city puts in new water and sewer lines, they're obligated to say to Mr. Aldrich, to the owner of the main hotel, giving them the option of putting new water and sewer lines in at the time, which did not happen. Mr. Aldrich said he was not once contacted by the city. He owns the Kenyon Noble building. Yeah, I have the name and phone number of the man who owns the main hotel. Two different people. But the city never once offered to Mr. Aldrich nor the owner of the main hotel to say, boy, this is time, you've got to put in a new water and sewer line because you've got a new city line coming in. That's what the city manager does not understand. The city did not do its due diligence. So there's some things that could be done in terms of grants, in terms of possibilities for housing. But the city did not do its job when it came to the Aldrich, the Kenyon Noble building and the main hotel.
Tricia? Any other public comment? Other public comment? Last time for public comment. Okay. Entertain a motion for adjournment. Okay.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting is adjourned at 10:25.
Mike, 2 seconds. All in favor? All in favor? Motion Oh, come on. It's
Okay, go home, gang. You what I'm doing right here?
I like to little fly on the wall.
You don't know me well enough for that now.